You are. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you. I know that Chair Jaimes had asked to be excused for much of this meeting because he has some events at his school today that he must attend. Um, so we'll watch for Vice Chair Kelly and Member Booth, or one or the other. Soon as we get one, we'll get started, I think. If not, Member Bogus and I will hold down the fort.
Yeah. We'll entertain witty repartee.
That's right. I
We'll
can't
just tell jokes.
remember. Yeah, in committee, I don't think, I mean, we could take a vote, but it wouldn't, I mean, you still have to have 3 out of the 5 committee members, if I understand correctly,
I don't
to
I don't think that's in our bylaws. I
pass
think
something out of committee.
I think we could technically pass something out of committee with 2 votes, but it might be in a policy, but I don't think it's in our bylaws. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying, well, we've never had that scenario, so I just don't, I don't know. We've always
Vice
had.
Chair Kelly is on.
Oh, great. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to let I'm Cindy Davis, and I'll be chairing this committee, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm going to have Vice Chair Kelly and Member Bogus briefly introduce themselves as well, and then we'll get going. Can you hear us, Vice Chair Kelly?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I love your background picture.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm in the fancy headphones. I'm in it, right?
That was a fun day. I don't know if other members can hear you better, but to me, you sound a little bit like you're underwater.
Okay. I'll hold the phone a little bit closer to my face and see if that works a little better. Does that help?
Okay. A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I am Cole Kelly. I am the board representative in District 12, which covers Orem, Linden, Vineyard, a piece of Pleasant Grove, and Wasatch County, Duchesne County, Uintah County, and Daggett County. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you. Member Bogus?
Awesome. Thank you. So my name is Christina Bogus. I am the representative for Taylorsville, Kearns, and West Jordan, and I have 5 West Valley City precincts in my things. Much smaller space, same number of people.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'm looking to see, I don't see that Randy has joined. So let's go ahead. We have 2 wonderful staff introductions today. It looks like we have Jerry Record first. That's who I have on my sheet. Jerry, are you?
I'm here. Sorry. We are doing 2 different committee meetings and just making sure that everything running. Someone came to the door right when you said my name. So, I'm Jerry Record. I'm the media production specialist here with the Utah State Board of Education. I've worked here for about 22 years, going on 23. I have a degree in communication broadcasting. Enjoy my job here. I was told that I was supposed to give something people may not know about me. For 20, I mean, you might know this, but for about 25 years, I've worked for the Utah Jazz, and I've ran their Jumbotron. Recently just went to on-call status, but for 20 of those 25 years, I was the technical director of the Jumbotron. So if you saw things like the Kiss Cam or anything like that, that was me putting you up or putting someone up. I've had some fun experiences there. Not only do I do the Utah Jazz, I have also done the University of Utah. I did that for 15 years, the same thing. And currently, I'm doing all the Weber State Wildcat football games for ESPN Plus. So that's, if you didn't know that about me, that's that's who I am. So,
Jerry, I did not know this about you. When do you sleep?
um, well, okay. So,
Ever?
interesting story. It's kind of embarrassing for me, but when my son got his Eagle Scout, he was thanking all everybody that helped him with it, and he goes, and I really want to thank my mom because without her, I couldn't have done this. I would thank my dad, but he was never home, so that kind of
Oh,
hard. But
man.
I worked a lot, but I'm enjoying my time now. Again, I'm just on call, so whenever they need help, I try to fill in, but that's like maybe twice a month, if that. So I'm good where I'm at now. So
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. We appreciate you are the one who keeps us up and running online for the world, whoever wants to understand what's happening here at USBE. So thank you for that.
thank you. And I'm sorry, I gotta run and help out with another committee real quick. So.
Exactly. We understand. Thank you. All right. Next we have our Claudia. Oh, Claudia, you've taught me how to say your last name, and tell me if I'm going to get it right. Is it Duque? Duque?
Duque, Duque,
Duque. Duque.
Duque, correct.
Duque. Duque.
Yes.
Yes. Claudia Duque.
Mm-hmm.
Please, let's hear about you.
All right. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. It's very exciting. My name is Claudia Duque, born and raised in Colombia. Came to United States 25 years ago, working for USB for 3 years. Before that, I was part of the finance department for the state of Utah, Division of Disbursements. My passion definitely are books. I love to read. In my book number 31 for this year. And what I love about my job is in the today world of technology, the human connection is kind of lost. And I can tell Mason and I are kind of like the face of the agency. We feel like we are the first contact by phone, in person, for our coworkers, for our vendors, for our teachers that come to their trainings, for visitors, and even for strangers. The Google Map bring them here because when people put in Google Map a different address, they come here and it's 500 East instead of 500 South. We have people from all over coming and calling, requesting information, and being that human connection that people feel welcome. Sorry. Ta-da. Okay. That people feel connected, that somebody's listening, not a machine, is what make my job absolutely full of joy. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And you and Mason, I think it's no surprise, are two of my very favorite people. And I think if we were going to make a training for anybody that's greeting anyone in any public space in any area, we could film what's happening at USBE and it would be very beneficial training. So thank you so much for all that you do
Thank
for
you,
us and to
Cherry.
make all of us feel welcome all the time.
Thank you,
I,
Cherry.
uh,
Thank you so much.
I want to add to that, if you don't mind.
Please.
Claudia, you were the first face that I met when I walked in as a new board member, and friendly and fun, and you and Mason certainly bring a light to the agency. So appreciate what you do. And I also just wanted to mention that Jerry, who's behind the scenes, just get it done, and I appreciate the work that Jerry does as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, here. Agree with those comments about Claudia and Mason and Jerry. Board members, I don't know if it's possible for you to rename so that you put a number in front of your name. It helps. I think it pulls you up to the front of my screen. At least they're telling me this. It's just easier for me to see when you have a hand up. But if I miss you, especially since there are only 3 of us here, please just speak up. All right. Thanks again for coming today. And let's move right into our public comment. I'm going to quickly read a public disclaimer. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes per person. A comment can express simple support or dissent about regulatory action. However, a constructive comment supported by evidence, data, and information is more likely to influence regulatory decision-making. Individuals should not use the public comment to complain about personnel issues or attack or defame an individual. Speakers making a highly detailed or complex comment should also consider providing a written outline of their words to the board. Please remember that children may hear your comments. Be thoughtful and professional. Keep your comments appropriate for a general audience. If you have material with explicit language or content, please submit such material in writing to the board at publiccomments@schools.utah.gov. And let's go ahead and move into our public comments now. It looks like we have Royce Van Tassel, Executive Director at Utah Association of Public Charter Schools first. And Royce, I think that, I can't remember if you've got 2 minutes. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you for a moment this morning. I've spoken with you, Chair Davis, as well as Paula Plant about this. You're going to consider amendments today to 2 different rules that govern the way trust lands monies are distributed and the processes that LEAs have to go through in order to receive those. I participated in some of the discussions leading up to today's proposed amendments, and on some level, I'm fine with those. But as I reviewed the rules today and thought through the experience that I've had at several charter schools, that I've seen at other schools, it occurred to me that the weight of these rules in their collective, in all of their complexity, may be outweighing what we're trying to do. The goal, of course, with trust lands money is to have a lot of local control. And what I see whenever this comes around, and it's usually in roughly the August timeframe, the director hands the board a piece of paper that has been pre-approved by the folks in the trust lands office that says, please approve this. If you don't, we have to go back and seek reapproval. And where the rules, for example, say that you need to adopt rules of procedure, we have gotten into nitty-gritty that feels far more weighty than what the local control ought to represent. And my request is to say how much of these specifics are required by statute and how much of it is something that's been added on by the state board. Frankly, if it comes back and says that all of this is required by the legislature, I'm going to go to the legislature and say, I think we may be tightening things down more, because again, the goal is to provide local control. And what I see in this attempt to specify everything about the way you approve that plan feels remarkably lack of local control. So my request is that you ask your staff over the next time to lay out statute, lay out the rule, and say, this is what the statute requires, this is what the rule requires, and how much flexibility can we actually create?
Thank you so much. I'm taking notes. If you see me looking down, I'm taking notes. Thank you. Let's go to Gracie Krellin from American Preparatory Academy, Chief Financial Officer.
Yes, it doesn't matter where I'm at.
Great.
And Casey, how do you say your last name again?
Ellen,
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
it's almost easier to think of it with a K for some reason for most folks.
Okay.
But,
Thanks.
so thank you very much. As you indicated, I work with American Preparatory Academy and have for several years here in the finance area. And I just wanted to raise two issues to make sure that I can get educated and understand some of the direction that we're taking education. One is I'm kind of here and I'm hoping to gain some further understanding with some of the folks I work with your staff of a recent communication of a change in SPED funding, which is something I think you're going to be considering in today's meeting. So I'm hoping that will help educate me as to what's happening there so that I can educate the folks in my district at our LEA and understand what may have happened historically and how that's impacting us and how that may get enacted as we move forward, the timing of that. And I'm hoping to make a small, just from the little we know so far, I want to make sure that I put forward a suggestion that we look very closely at how we implement the change and the reduction, if there is one, ultimately in the SPED funding, and that we hopefully look at this fiscal year as a hold harmless year, given the fact that we're well into the year with the planning and staffing and what have you that all schools have done, and that we look to the future years to try and put a plan in place to get this rectified if that's the end result. And the second comment I just want to quickly make, this is just more of a citizen observer. I'm finding myself increasingly shocked when I hear in the public what we are spending for schools. And I have to tell you, we have really struggled to try and expand or consider building a new school in this post-COVID construction environment. It's out of control. We don't see any opportunities to build new schools financially. We just don't even see how it happens. And yet I hear in the news that Highland High School is going to be rebuilt with $300 million in bonding. The West High School is going to be rebuilt with $300 million in new funding. The South or West Jordan is building a what do you call a grow house for $700,000, $500 a square foot. And I just do the simple math. I just want to walk through, for the time I have, it's simple math. $300 million to rebuild my old high school. That's if it's 5%, that's going to cost $15 million a year just to service the interest. That doesn't even count for reserves and everything else that goes along with bonding. And I deal with bonding. So we have to, as a charter, we don't get a lot of help. We have to do our own buildings, finance, and handle that. So I handle that. So I'm very familiar with it. At $15 million a year for that Highland High School to serve bond service, I think they have 2,000 students if I'm somewhere in that area. And if I calculate a 10,000 student, and I'm going to keep this really simple, you come up with $20 million. In my world, to rebuild that high school, it has to somehow pay for itself. There is no way in the world that I live in that can be a financially viable decision. And I'm concerned that we are becoming totally disconnected with the financial realities that we are in these days with these decisions that are going forward. I don't see how that school district or that school could be justified at that level of expense. You have $5 million left to run a high school each year. And that's just not going to happen. It can't happen. So someone else is paying for that. And they're not going to do it just for Highland. They're going to do it for West. They've done it for Skyline. They've done it for Olympus, all in a district that's losing 5% of its enrollment this year, with a continued forecast of reductions in enrollment each and every year from your own people here, I think for the next 7, 10 plus years. So I just want to add a comment. I hope that people are taking a serious look, and I'd like to open up a discussion with the charter world and the state board to discuss capital spending, how we move forward, and how charters move forward as kind of a growing part of the education landscape, and how we do that successfully given the environment we're in with building costs and what have you. And I just want to kind of leave it as an open item that I'm really want to just invite some serious open discussion about this and analysis so that we can understand the thinking behind what the state school board is willing to do for a Highland or a West or a Skyline or an Olympus, and what we're doing in the charter world. in this state to educate kids. They're all our kids. We want the structures they're in to be safe. We want them to be nice. We want them to be well educated. And there just seems to be an incredible disparity right now in how that's happening across the state. So I just want to leave it at that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And we also have here John McQuarrie, Academica West Business Manager. I see John online.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Yes. My name is John McQuarrie. I work for Academica West and serve as the business administrator for Syracuse Arts Academy, one of the schools that will be significantly affected by the proposed fiscal year 26 and subsequent year special education add-on allocation changes based on adjustments to the WPU. First, I just wanted to express my appreciation to Sam Uri and Dale Frost for taking the time to discuss the complexities of special education funding for new and expanding charter schools. Their willingness to share background and historical context has been beneficial in helping me better understand this issue and how we got here today. Because time is limited, I'll move directly to our concerns. If the Finance Committee recommends to the board that the proposed reductions take effect in fiscal year 26, the impact on Syracuse Arts Academy's special education program would be severe and honestly catastrophic. A 42% decrease represents approximately $1,237,000 in lost or reduced funding. For a school where nearly 18% of students require special education services, a reduction of this magnitude would create cascading consequences, including termination of staff and teacher contracts partway through the fiscal year. This would cause major disruption and prevent the school from thoughtfully planning and restructuring its program to align with reduced funding. Increased teacher caseloads and decreased morale at a time when it is already difficult to recruit and retain qualified special educators due to burnout and high demand. And also diminished quality and consistency of services for special education students who rely on individualized instruction and support. I believe it's important to emphasize that the overfunding caused by the inflated WPU calculations was not the school's fault. The issue stemmed from an unintentional state-level miscalculation that failed to properly account for and reconcile WPU numbers for expanding charter schools. Until recently, there was no mechanism in place at USBE to do this. In Syracuse Arts Academy's case, this flawed methodology persisted for more than a decade and across multiple expansions, making the discrepancy difficult to detect. Throughout this period, Syracuse Arts Academy has used all special education funds appropriately to serve its students without any carryover. The school has built a strong, reputable program that directly benefits its special education population. While we fully understand that the funding adjustments are necessary, we respectfully ask that the Finance Committee and Board recognize this as a long-standing, unintentional miscalculation or error, and we urge that corrections be implemented gradually over a period of 3 or more years rather than all at once. This phased approach would allow us to responsibly adjust our operations while minimizing the negative impact on our students and the critical services that they depend on. So I just thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration on this issue.
Thank you, John.
Chair Davis,
Yes?
John McQuarrie is saying this is a miscalculation, is false. That's wrong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we will get more background, and I think it could be terminology too. I know that we need to look at the formula moving forward and such like that. So I appreciate that, and I think we'll get more clarification from you and your team, Deputy Jones. And I do appreciate the public input that we've heard so far from our 3 contributors. Next, we have Samuel Gibbs from Salt Lake Academy, Executive Director.
Hi, thank you for your time, Chair and committee. My name is Sam Gibbs, and I'm the executive director at Salt Lake Academy, which represents Salt Lake Academy Primary School, Intermediate School, and high school. We service just over 900 students on 2 campuses. I'm actually also requesting that the committee consider waiving components of R277-550 for fiscal year 2026, and then consider a potential waterfall implementation in future years as well. I would like to just elucidate a couple points on that if I could. It specifically uses a singular data point, October 1, for a funding mechanism on expansion or satellite school. In reference to Salt Lake Academy specifically, this represents the reduction represents more than a 50% reduction of our special education add-on funds this year, and 4% of the total operating costs of our LEA. While I recognize the formula, this is kind of artificially imposes upon us an unanticipated loss in revenue, and it would trigger some pretty catastrophic things within our specific LEA that we weren't allowed to budget for in our July proposed budget. It could result in deficit spending as an LEA and put us in jeopardy of violating our charter agreements as well as our bond covenants. But more importantly, it would dramatically impact the function of our special education services and our ability to provide a maintenance of effort and FAPE to all of our students. I don't believe the regulation as it's currently constituted takes into account the requirements for operating and maintaining an appropriate special education program and offering FAPE. It requires an infrastructure, including direct instruction, accommodations, as well as related services such as speech, OT, PT, where the infrastructure must be maintained whether you have 50 students on a caseload or 100 students on a caseload. Those individuals have to be present. In regards to our specific case, Salt Lake Academy is not a traditional charter expansion and satellite. We actually assumed ownership and operation of a previously existing school that was in failure status and corrective status, and we opted to assume ownership and operation of that school in an attempt to actually help the school survive, serve the student population, and allow them to proceed and go forward. The caseload we currently have is 87 students. We also have 10 students in the evaluation process currently and 61 additional students that are Tier 3 in our MTSS monitoring process. Students in Tier 3 often require special education services until determined otherwise. And so while if we use a singular data point as R277-550 does for a traditional expansion or satellite, it doesn't take into account the ebb and flow that is a traditional progress of special education identification and service providership. Using the other formulas, the 4-year rolling and some of the other formula mechanisms that have traditionally been applied, we would qualify for the funds as they are currently allotted, and the implementation of R277-550 with the reduction of funds would virtually make it impossible for us to provide FAPE to our prospective population and those students that could be identified and may likely be identified in this fiscal year. So again, I request that the application of 277 be waived for FY26, and then if it must be implemented as it is, it be considered in a waterfall in future years.
Thank you so much. I know we're not technically doing a back and forth during public comment, but is Sonia Woodbury still your director?
No, I'm the director currently. So
you're the director currently. Okay, good job. She and I were on a task force at one point a while back, and got to know a little bit about her and your school, which was fun. Thank you all 4 of you for sharing your input today. We appreciate hearing and learning, and I don't think we had a timer going necessarily to the limit to the 2 minutes. I know that we went a little bit over, but we're looking at potentially big consequences for kids, and I want to make sure that we're hearing from all the parts of the multifaceted prism. So thank you for sharing. Let's go ahead and move on to our agenda. We are on item 3.4, which is distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration for the school land trust program.
Cindy,
Yes.
there was a public comment that was submitted via email. I know Cammie is familiar with that. Cammie, if you're on, is that something that we were asked to read in public comment? Do you know what the center of that email was requesting?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I actually forwarded that to the board this morning. In her paragraph, it just mentioned either to read it or forward it to the board. So I did that this morning.
Okay, so it was forwarded to the board, and that's meeting the request of the citizen. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yep.
All right, super.
Thank you.
And I'll just do a quick summary. And just to clarify publicly, it's a he.
Yes.
But just in case he's listening, Karsten Walker, if you're listening. But also I wanted to just say that comment was in support of looking at the doing a working group for looking at property taxes overall. And I believe he is one of your constituents, Cole. And anyway, appreciated that public comment as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did yesterday with that task force is add 2 members of the general public, and I sure hope that Karsten is one that will apply for that, because I think he would be a great voice to have on that. So.
Yes, and also for public awareness, if you didn't see our meeting yesterday, we also added a member of the LFA and GOPB, which is the legislative fiscal analyst, and also the government operations for, I want to say policy and budgeting. Did I get that right, Deputy Jones? I think that's the acronym.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing that up, Vice Chair Kelly. It looks like we still don't have Member Booth. It looks like I have multiple. Member Booth is saying he cannot get into this meeting.
He sent me a text and said he was able to get on now. So, Member Booth, if you're there, let us know.
I do show him in the participants list.
Cindy, Member Booth is actually right next to Cole Kelly in the list. Okay. I don't know if he's on a phone. It's sometimes difficult to engage your mute button, but I do see him here.
Yeah.
Whether or not he can hear us.
That's helpful. Thank you. I just sent him a text to say that we can see you, but we can't hear you. So Member Booth, if you can hear us, will you unmute and let us and say hello? All right, I'll see if he texts back. Okay, and until then, maybe someone can call him. Maybe
Cindy,
a staff.
I can do that, or well, if staff can, but
okay.
It's up to you.
Okay, I'm just wondering if a staff that's not presenting on this next issue can maybe give him a call. Or if you want to, that's fine too, Member Bogus. But if you want to hear this part, then we can have someone call him.
I don't think it will take that long.
Okay.
Let me see what I can do. If I can't get through, I'll come back on and politely interrupt.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and move forward then and talk about the distribution of the funds from the trust lands account.
Member Davis, I'll be doing this for Ben Rasmussen. He's
actually,
in a different meeting.
Actually, you know what? I'm out of order. I apologize. We're actually on 3.2 right now, which is the The information research brief, charter schools in Utah, performance on college and career metrics. Looks like from the UDRC and the USHE research. I apologize.
Yes, indeed. Am I okay to move forward with that?
Yes,
My name
you
is
are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremiah Solari, Senior Assistant Commissioner of Research and Data Systems here at UDRC, or the Utah Data Research Center. Really very thankful for the opportunity to present to this committee today on the findings of our research that we've very close to concluding and publishing. So representing the UDRC along with me, I have RFN, who is the Assistant Commissioner of Research, and then Carrie Main, who is the Associate Commissioner of the Office of Research and Data Science here within USHE. So I'll pass it over to Karen here in a second to introduce herself and to start the presentation on the research. But before that, I just wanted to really quickly provide some context as to the reason for the creation of this research. So every year, the UDRC produces a research agenda. That research agenda is a coordination between the UDRC and our data partners, of which the Utah State Board of Education is one of them. So this research was proposed and requested by USBE, and we added it to our research agenda, and we are now at the point where we're very close to publishing it. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give all of you a sneak peek on the findings and conclusions of that research, as we're going to be publishing it next week to a broader audience. So I thought it would be very valuable for us to do so here to this committee. So at the behest of Commissioner Scott Jones. So Superintendent Scott Jones. So I'm going to pass it over to Karen now for the presentation on our research. So go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this presentation. So just like Jeremiah said, this research was initiated by the agenda item, and so we're just looking at post-secondary and workforce outcomes for Utah's charter high school students. So on the next slide, you'll see our research questions here. So the first question we will be looking at is if there is any enrollment and completion rates difference for charter high school students and non-charter high school students for those who attend in Utah. And then if there is, what about the time to enrollment and time to completion at their post-secondary institutions? And then also bringing in DWS data, Department of Workforce Services, what are the wage and workforce attachments after students leave their high school or a post-secondary institution? And then finally, using a propensity score matching technique, how is charter high school attendance related to outcomes in post-secondary and workforce outcomes? And with the scope of this study, it's important to keep in mind that we're looking at students who were educated in Utah and employed in Utah. So that means they graduated from either a charter high school or a non-charter high school in Utah. So this data came from USBE. Now with that, also keep in mind that using data from high school feedback report, so our Utah high school graduates had about 51% of them attended post-secondary education, and out of those 51%, about 80% attended a USHE institution. And also we're looking at students who were employed in Utah by firms that report wages to the state's unemployment insurance program. So according to DWS, about 95% of the wages were reported to this program in Utah. So what does this not include? So that does not include any students who may have attended a private secondary institution in Utah. So for example, BYU or Westminster. And also we do not have data on students who attended out of state. So UNLV, UCLA, any other out of state institutions. And also, we would not have included students who left Utah for employment or for their further education. And also, even if they worked in Utah, there are certain wages that were not included. So for example, self-employment, federal employees, or some other nonprofit organizations. And also, we would not have included any students who chose not to work or other circumstances that prevented them from showing up in our wage data. So moving on to the main findings of our research. So charter high school students, their outcome compared to non-charter peers, we're seeing that they're earning twice as many CE credits and they're earning 3 times as many AP credits. They had a lower high school graduation rate. And looking at their post-secondary outcomes, they had a lower USHE enrollment rate and they enrolled in a USHE institution sooner. They also graduated with a degree slightly sooner, although they had lower average post-secondary GPAs and lower USHE graduation rates. And looking at their workforce outcomes in Utah, there's a lower workforce attachment and lower average earnings. So our study sample, we're looking at cohort years at USBE 2012 to 2021, and we're focusing on high school students only. So this is grade levels between 9 and 12. So charter high school students in this research is defined as a student who ever attended a charter high school in Utah. We had a discussion about looking at the number of days that a student is in a charter high school, but we found that the median length of attendance is anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So we went with a binary yes or no for the charter high school attendance. So as you can see on the graph, there are about 12% charter school students in our sample size of 426 and 95 high school students. And this is consistent with what was reported in the 2025 data report from USBE. Moving on to the next slide, we'll be looking at the student composition using descriptive statistics from USBE. So the percentage of underrepresented students increased from 2012 to 2021 for both charter and non-charter high schools. We're seeing white students in charter high schools decreased from 82.7% in 2012 to 73% in 2021. So that is a sharper decline than their non-charter high school peers. On the other hand, Hispanic students, they're also represented on your right-hand side with this graph. Hispanic students increased from 10.4% in 2012 to 17.9% in 2021 for those who attended a charter high school. And this mirrors an increase at non-charter high schools. So for the following graphs, in general, the yellow line represents charter high school students and the dark blue is the non-charter high school students. And on the next slide, we're now seeing a comparison. So remember yellow representing the charter high school students. So that's on your left. And the dark blue is the non-charter high school students on your right. So we're seeing, generally speaking, a decrease for white students. That's a very top one. And then for the rest of them, for the minority students, we're seeing increase in all of them, except for low-income students. Now, we'll talk about that actually right now. So low-income students, they're defined as students who received free or reduced lunch. And in 2021, that was the last year of our study, because of CARES Act, as a response to the pandemic, the application to free or reduced lunch was waived. So that resulted in a artificially low percentage of students from a low-income family. So the trend is that those who were underrepresented were increasing as a percentage. Moving on to the next slide, now we're looking at post-secondary readiness, still using descriptive statistics from USBE. So charter high school students had a lower graduation rate, high school graduation rate, compared to non-charter high school students. However, if we're looking at CE and AP courses, the rate of charter school students taking CE credit was comparable to non-charter school students, and AP credits were low for both groups. Now, on the right-hand side, here is a visual representation of the average number of credits earned by both groups. So charter high school students were earning 45 credits in CE compared to 22 credits from the non-charter group. And if we're looking at the AP credits at the bottom, charter high school students were earning 3 times as many AP credits compared to non-charter high school students on average. And continuing on with post-secondary outcomes, so on the top left corner here, you're seeing USHE enrollment rates. So charter high school students or charter high school graduates, they were enrolling in USHE at 36%, and non-charter high school graduates were enrolling at 43%. And if we're breaking down the average time to enrollment for degree granting institutions in USHE, charter high school students took 8 months to enroll, whereas non-charter high school students took average of 9 months to enroll. Then on the bottom there, you're seeing technical college enrollment rates, or sorry, time to enrollments. So charter high school students were enrolling in 12 months compared to 16 months on average by non-charter high school students. So in both case scenarios, you're seeing charter high school students enrolling sooner compared to non-charter high school students. While they're in post-secondary education, the average GPA for charter high school students were 2.56, just slightly lower than the 2.70 average of non-charter high school students. Then we come back to the bottom left-hand corner here, looking at USHE graduation rate. Charter school students were graduating from a USHE institution at a slightly lower rate compared to their non-charter peers. So charter high school graduates, they were graduating from USHE at 25% compared to 31% from the non-charter group. And then on the next slide, we're looking at their post-secondary completion. So out of all of the all of the students that were enrolled, 30.4% of them received at least one award. And that shows you 25% by charter high school students and 31% by non-charter high school students. The average months to their first USHE, from their first USHE enrollment to their first USHE completion was 34.6 months. And if you're looking at the graph bottom left, that is the degree granting institution completion months. So charter high school students were completing sooner compared to their non-charter high school peers. And the average months from the first technical college enrollment to the first technical college completion was 34.4 months on average. And if you look at the bottom right of that graph, you're also seeing that charter high school graduates were completing at about the same time as their non-charter peers. So on the next slide here, we're taking all the students who received at least one USHE award and then breaking them down by the highest educational attainment that they received. So I want to draw your attention to bachelor's degree. You're seeing that those who attended at least one charter high school were receiving bachelor's degree at a higher percentage rates, whereas those who never attended a charter high school were receiving more associate degrees. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're looking at the degrees received by high school graduates. And now on the next slide, we'll be talking about the statistical techniques that we used. So We're using a propensity score matching technique. First, we calculated the propensity scores for each student to attend a charter high school. This is simply a probability of a student attending a charter high school given their demographic backgrounds. And then once we have the propensity scores, we calculated the weight for each student. So that is the inverse probability weight of the using propensity score. Then once we have the weight, average treatment effect is just the difference between the weighted average of the two groups of students. So the next slide shows us the finding from our model. So the average effects and the 95% confidence interval of attending a charter high school shown here. Charter high school students were slightly more likely to earn AP credits, less likely to earn CE credits, slightly less likely to enroll in a post-secondary institution in USBE, and they are quicker to enroll, slightly lower USBE GPA, and slightly lower post-secondary graduation in USBE, and they're quicker to graduate from USBE. And that was a lot of information that we just went over, so I want to again point out our limitations. So remember that our study does not include students who attended an in-state private post-secondary institution or attended an out-of-state post-secondary institution. So that also includes anyone who may have first enrolled in USBE and then transfer out. So we would not have captured their graduation rate. And for students who may have left Utah for employment or further education. So if anyone who left Utah for employment, they would not have shown up in our wage outcomes. Anyone who may have worked in Utah but are self-employed, federal employees or other nonprofit organizations. And then also we may not have included students who chose not to work or for any other reasons. Another thing to keep in mind is that DWS data, our wage records, they do not give us any detail on the number of hours worked by the students. So coming to conclusion, charter high school students' outcome compared to their non-charter high school peers. Looking at post-secondary readiness, they earn twice as many concurrent enrollment credits, earn 3 times as many AP credits, lower high school graduation rates. And looking at post-secondary outcomes, they earned a lower USBE enrollment rate, but they were enrolling in USBE institutions sooner, and they were graduating with a degree slightly sooner. Slightly lower average post-secondary GPA and a lower USBE graduation rate. And looking at workforce outcome using Utah UI covered workforce data, they had a lower workforce attachment and lower average earnings. So I think those are all the slides that we have prepared. Is there any questions? You're welcome.
Yeah, it looks like we do have a question, Vice Chair Kelly.
When you're saying that they have a lower graduation rate, and sorry for the background noise, but the lower graduation rate. So was that when you pointed out bachelor's degrees, the charter students had a higher percentage of students earning a bachelor degree, but a lower percentage earning associate's degrees. So, is that any degree at all? And so they have a lower rate of graduation for any degree at all.
Yes, that's correct. That is a great question. Thank you for pointing that out. So when I said that they had a lower graduation rate, that is looking at students ever graduating with any type of degree. And then that table that you were just looking at, where the bachelor's degree is highlighted, that is breaking down by their highest educational attainment. So those are two different things. So this table here that you're seeing, that is looking at everyone who's already gotten a degree and looking at what their highest degree is.
Okay. Okay, super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not seeing any other questions from board members. I appreciate your presentation. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And then we will go ahead and move on to our data standards amendment 3.3. And it looks like we have policy analyst Greg Connell with us. I think I emphasized that wrong. I think it's Connell.
You got it.
And
No,
also,
no worries.
before you move on, I do need to apologize too to Sam, because earlier I got City Academy and Salt Lake Academy conflated in my brain. So I apologize. That's where Sonia is. All right, let's go ahead and start. Greg, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg Cannell, Policy Analyst for the Utah State Board of Education. We are looking at the amendments to R277484 data standards. So just to run you real quick through the changes that we're looking at in this rule, starting on line 66, we've added new definitions for new school for the purposes of data reporting standards. That takes us down to line 77, which we added a definition for private school entity. And then lines 83, we add in a definition of school. Then if we go to lines 104, then we added in USIMS, a definition for the Utah School Information Management System, and added in the code that explains that. And then continuing on to lines 111, we've included a new section in this rule for what would be required to include any data for private school entities in Cactus or USIMS. And that is a pretty significant section, goes down to line 134. Line 155 is our next change. Line 55 adds in the definition for new school for R277484 and clarifies that the reporting deadlines need to be met for those new schools. And lastly, in line 185, we added in USIMS to be consistent with our new data systems.
Okay.
And that is all the changes. Sorry about that. Yep.
Thank you. Member Vargas has a hand up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if, okay.
Sorry. So I
That's
know
okay.
that if I put it up long enough while I'm trying to find my other screen, it will eventually
Oh.
show on yours.
Okay.
I'm wondering, and maybe it's the cart before the horse, but it's not very long before Cactus goes away. I think it could be gone even before the next board meeting. And so I'm wondering why we don't fix that now, as opposed to bringing this back after it's gone. Is there a reason?
Chair, if I may.
Please.
Malia Height, Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. We would request that the committee keep Cactus in this board rule at this time. Cactus, while USIMS is being stood up and we're close to delivering the first set of functionality to LEAs, Cactus still holds the vast majority of data, specifically around our schools and funding, and the critical things are still going to be in Cactus for at least a year.
Do you want my response?
No.
If you want to.
Oh, I just appreciate the explanation. That's all.
Thank you so much
for that.
And thank you. Director Bruff has his hand up.
I'm just, if it's okay, I'll just add to what Malia stated here is when Cactus is going away, the interface that the LEAs are currently using that component of Cactus is going away. And so when she states that it's still maintaining the records, the data information system of Cactus still exists. And so we are still relying upon that as we do a, if you will, parallel development or transition from one system to the other systems. When Member Baga says it's going away, she is correct, but it's not being deleted. If that just to clarify what why it's still left inside of her, because we still have to rely upon it for, like Malia said, maybe a year still as we are doing that transition. Thank you.
So it sounds like a phase out. So thank you, Director Bruff and Dr. Height. And let's see, seeing no other hands, I'll entertain a motion. Put it up on the board.
I will move that the committee approve R277484 data standards draft 2 on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Before I read that back out to the body, Member Bogus has a hand. Sorry if I didn't see that. I heard something, but I couldn't make out what was being said.
No, it's okay. I would like to take us to line 77. So it says a private school entity. And as I read this definition, I'm wondering if we're trying to distinguish between a private school and a private school entity. Are they actually different? Because if they are or not, I have a follow-up question.
Chair, if I may, Leah Head, Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. The intent of this definition is to include private schools that are accredited private schools, but also other educational entities like a regional treatment center that is first and foremost a medical facility, but also provides some educational services. It also could include a preschool that is providing services through our Carson Smith service. So there's a lot of things that would be outside the scope of what we would consider a private school, specifically looking at school as defined in R277-100. So that was why this definition was added here to this rule.
So I have a follow-up question. Is that okay, Chair?
Go ahead. Sure.
Executive Coordinator Height. Got it right. Yes. I always call her Director Height. So Executive Coordinator Height. My question is, what happens if you look at lines 79 and 80? Mm-hmm. I see that it says if the school only provides online instruction. What happens to those schools who are brick and mortar, and they reside here, but they're owned and operated by an out-of-state entity? What happens to those schools?
Yeah, so if the school itself has a physical presence within Utah and that line 78, then it would be included. So many of our regional treatment centers, for example, would fall under that category. They are owned by a medical business that is not centered in Utah, but because they possess a valid business license to do business within the state of Utah and have their physical presence in Utah, then they would meet the definition of a private school entity.
Okay, I think I understand better now. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. So we'll go back to the motion that Vice Chair Kelly had put out on the floor, and that recommended action was that the committee approves R277-484 Data Standards Draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'm on aye.
Okay. Thank you. That passes with members Davis, Kelly, and Booth in favor, and member Bogus abstention. And let's go to action item 3.4, please. Distribution of funds from trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program amendment.
Thank you, Chair Greg Cannell, policy analyst. We also have with us Paula Plant, who can take all the hard questions. I will tee this up for you. There are a lot of changes in this rule, and it is a pretty long rule, and I will try and go through those quickly. On line 19, we have updates to code. Lines 42 through 45, we have updates to the definitions, adding an academic and striking approving entity. On lines 48 through 60, we add definitions for board councils, budget officer, carryover limit, charter council. We strike lines 61 through 68. Line 70 has a clarification to the definition to council. Line 72, striking charter, trust, land council, or school community council from the definition. Line 74 through 77, we added in definitions for district liaison. Line 90 added in non-academic. Line 95, definition for principal was refined. Line 103, the definition for SLT reporting website is included. Line 116, removal of trust land and clarification on charter schools governing boards. Lines 119 and 134, removal of trust land council, and we'll find that throughout the rest of the document as we're updating the name. Line 135, removal of requirement to have a parent or grandparent elected by parents of the students attending the school. Lines 154 or line 154 is stricken. Lines 160 through 168 adds in requirements for the director of a charter school for reporting. Line 170 is a title change. Line 176 is updated language and code references. Lines 179 through 186 are stricken. Lines 188 through 203 are requirements for the principals to receive funding through this program. Lines 214 through 222, removal of old language. Line 223 adds in requirements on completion of the school land trust plan. Lines 229 to 237 are stricken. Line 238, there's an inclusion of the LEA governing board and budget officer. Lines 247 to 262 is a clarification on the plan review process and requirements for budget office approval. Lines 264 to 271 are stricken. Line 272 to 285 adds in new requirements for data points to be included in the plan. Lines 285 to 309, clarification of some of the terms. Those are the ones changing the names to match the rest of the document. Line 300, corrective action is included for corrective action that's allowed in R277114. 314, lines 314 to 324 are stricken. Lines 325 to 335 adds in requirements for a council to review the plan annually and a requirement that the plan support academic components that are listed. Lines 348 to 353 adds in additional items the plan may include. Line 416 adds an additional requirement for reallocations if they happen after the October 1st deadline. Line 483 is stricken. Line 486 through 495. Again, we have clarifications of terms so they match. And then last but not least, line 515, requirements for reimbursement of funding not spent correctly, requires the LA to reimburse the trust land.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that summary. I'm not seeing hands right now, but I do have a question since I'm not seeing hands from our members. Director Plant, might I ask you a question? I'm looking. I see you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. When we had our less formal kind of just lunch and learn meeting, I had asked you how this came to be. There are a lot of changes over these two rules, and you said it was about a year-long process. And I think it would be helpful if you kind of describe what that process is and who was involved in coming up with these particular changes. And then we had public comment at the beginning of this meeting asking how many of these changes are related to code or are in code. And I'm wondering, and we can certainly, if the committee desires, have staff look at that and bring that information back. But I'm wondering if you already know that information. And if so, if you could share it with us.
Thank you. So I'll try to first explain that this committee provided guidance to the Trust Lands Advisory Committee. That is advisory to you. You appoint that committee to go through code and rule and look for simplification and clarification. And so over the past year, we have addressed the concerns primarily of clarification during this first year. And that's why you see so many changes related in the definitions. So there's been confusion about some of the, like even people will say, well, what is academic? Well, we have always said it's what's in the common, is what in the course standards, but they would like it to be in the rule. So that's, those kind of things came along, right, based on questions that have come up about clarity. So each meeting, we would take on a couple of questions or a couple of topics and try to discuss them thoroughly as opposed to going line by line. We're not finished. I would say that probably this first year we've done our best work related to clarity. And then we'll probably, based on the clarity, lots of questions have come up about simplification, somewhat similar to the comment that was made in the comments that's at the beginning. And so, for instance, in our meeting in November on the 17th, we will be discussing the website posting requirements that every school is required to post. Do we need all of those requirements? All of those requirements, except for one, are specifically in code. And so whenever we start talking about removing requirements, we're talking about removing things in code. And we can certainly go that direction. I think it's important to remember that we have legislators who, at somewhat level, want to own that thing. Sometimes it's difficult to remove it just because it was their thing. But that doesn't mean that we haven't done it in the past. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't try it again. I do want to be very clear that all of these changes went through the Trust Lands Advisory Committee. They voted on them. They're not mine. They're not my team's. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is in a couple of cases when issues came up, we didn't feel like we may have had adequate representation on the committee. And so we assembled two subcommittees. One was to discuss specifically charter issues. We do have a member on the committee that represents charter schools, but when we were talking about charter schools, we felt like we needed a broader representation. So we did assemble a committee, and they made recommendations that that came to the main committee, and have come forward to you. We also had some discussions about financial related things. Those things haven't been resolved, but again, we assembled a committee that had representation from business administrators in charter schools and districts, both large and small, so that we could make sure that we had representation and voice from all of those individuals. So I think that explains the process whereby we bring changes. I think it's also important to indicate that when you look at this rule specifically, there are a couple of updates, but there is nothing new. So based on the definitions, in incorporating those definitions into the rule, and then there has been some reorganization in process where people on the advisory committee said, let's list it in the rule in the order in which it occurs. And so those many changes that you're seeing primarily are trying to implement those two things. There are a couple of other changes that I think it's important probably to point out. Speaking specifically, like when it starts on lines 160 and it talks about safety and digital citizenship, that actually came from committee I was asked to sit on preparing curriculum related to digital citizenship and safety. And it came to my attention that this language is in the rule that you're going to address next, that is specifically to school community councils. But even though this language was in the code for charter schools, it was missing in the rule. So it's new in this rule, but it's just because it never made it into the rule from when it was put in the code. So that one is a change. Part of what we intend to address during the coming year is exactly what has already been discussed and has come up through the Trust Advisory Committee, and that would be simplification. I think we've addressed most of the clarifying issues, and now I think we'll be moving towards simplification. And then we will come back to you once the committee vets it and makes their recommendations. For instance, they want to have a discussion about the timing of the process. They want to have some other related discussions about, well, for instance, we had a superintendent who has come to us and said, should the distribution formula be the same for a school that is brick and mortar as a school that is specifically online, and has made the case that the expenses are different. And you've heard a little bit of that already in public comment today. We have decided as a committee to table that because we understand the legislature is going to take on that issue. And then we might follow up based on the decisions that they make. So I hope I have answered your questions. If you want me to point out the couple of places additional where there have been changes, the carryover amount on line 54, we had that conversation and came to our attention through those who represent on the committee, that 10% of carryover has been what's been the standard. A school couldn't carry over more than 10% of their current distribution. But for a very small school, 10% can mean a whole lot more than a very large school, a very large high school. And so the recommendation, after much discussion with business administrators and the schools, is that we ought to add a qualifier in there or $5,000, whichever is greater. Because for a small school, 10% could be less than that, right? And it becomes a real challenge for them. So that was a change. There has also been a change to the language related to incentives. And there was an indication that incentives at $2 a student has been that way for a long time, and it probably should increase. So they made the recommendation that it increase to $4 per student, and then also clarified that when an incentive is academic in nature, it could be more than $4. So for instance, we are aware of schools where in a reading that may have selected reading as their primary academic area. And what they're wanting to do is reward students that meet their reading goal with a book. Thereby, especially in homes where students don't have libraries, by the time a student makes their way through, you've started to establish a home library for that student and even for their siblings that are coming along. So that wouldn't count. You could spend more money. So I think that those are the main changes. I hope that I have answered your questions. There is some language on 416 to 418 that talks about reallocation. That is new language, and that is because coming from business administrators and others, we have learned, sorry, this light goes off if I sit still too long, that when a business administrator needs to do a reallocation of funding, they need to make sure that the principals know they're reallocating the funding, and they need to let us know, or else the numbers in the district may not be the same numbers that the principal is working with, and they may not be the same numbers that end up in their plan. So that is just a transparency requirement. So I think that's all I have. If you have other questions, I hope I've answered your question, Chair Davis.
Well, I will follow up, and I'm sensing a lag on my screen. Maybe I should turn my camera off for a minute. I heard you say that lines 416 to 418 is new language and a couple others. Those new language pieces, are those the only pieces that can't be tied back to code? All the other, even if they're clarifications, can be tied back to code. Am I hearing that correctly?
We have got that outlined and in our risk document, and I can indicate what is actually code and what it might be a definition of code. I don't think that there are very many things that are not related to the code. I can tell you one that is, that will be part of our discussion on the 17th, is the website posting requirements. For instance, it requires that a school post a copy of their teacher and student success plan. The reason that is there is when that teacher and student success plan came into being, the School Land Trust Program is supposed to support that plan. And parents were telling us, councils were telling us, we don't know how to prepare a plan that supports the teacher and student success plan unless we know what it is. And so that was put in the rule, but maybe it will come out. So that is the only requirement in the website posting requirements that is not specifically coming from code. But I think going through for simplification over the coming year, I think that's when we will really be focusing on what's in here that can come out. During the first years of the program and even into the middle, we sometimes had 4 and 5 bills in a legislative session that we're making changes to councils or making changes to the program. And it's very likely that some of that doesn't still need to be there, right? Do we really need all of it? And so that will be a conversation that we will be taking up over the coming year.
I keep thinking we will get more home runs in education if we move home plate less often. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I also texted one of our public commenters and just asked if he was comfortable with the working group looking through what is connected to code and moving forward over this simplification year as you do your work. And he indicated that would be helpful in that working group. So appreciate that. I'm not seeing any other hands on my screen currently. So seeing no hands, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the committee approve R277477 distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program, draft 1 on first reading, and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There is a motion that the committee approves R277-477 distributions of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program, draft 1 on first reading, and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Chair Hymas absent. Thank you. Now, maybe Director Plant, don't go anywhere because looks like you're up again. Although this one is an information item. This is the School Land Trust website, a cost benefit analysis. And it looks like we have staff leads, our Director Plant and Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Jones.
Chair Davis, we have another rule.
There's another rule, ma'am.
Oh, we have 491. I just skipped right over 491.
Oh, it's okay now. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it looks like Director Plant is actually here for 3 things. So we'll go back to that middle one I just skipped right over. Item 3.5, school action R277-491, School Community Council's amendment. And it looks like we have Analyst Connell again and Director Plant. So Analyst Connell, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. R277-491, this is the school community councils. I'll just run you through the amendments and then again, leave it to Paul Plant to answer all the hard questions. So in line 24, we have included it as category 4 in our oversight framework, R277-111. In lines 34 through 35, we've included requirements for the school principal's designee. In lines 61 through 69, we are striking these lines. Lines 71 through 143, this is a significant part of the amendments being made. This is a new section laying out the requirements for LEAs to apply for an exemption, and it also gives out the requirements for the exemption to be a full or partial exemption. Line 155, the requirements for information on single public access for a public accessible page. Lines 158 through 165, this is information on the contact information requirements that are being expanded. Lines 166 through 173 are being stricken. And lastly, line 221 has some updates to the references to code. And that concludes the major changes in this rule.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands again, but I would ask Director Plant if the same process and the same advisory stakeholders studied this one. And what will be the movement looking forward, will it also be to simplify in the next phase?
Absolutely. The language, most of the language in this bill is actually coming from the legislature. So 2 years ago, Representative Moss sponsored a bill indicating that schools could, under certain circumstances, receive an exemption from having a school community council when they had difficulty seating the council. We spoke about it at length. They were concerned that they didn't just grant an exemption, but that it was clearly outlined in the rule how a school would go through that process. And so all of that language is the process that they need to go through. Now, I want to explain carefully that in a given year, we have 13 to 17 schools statewide that have a need to request an exemption. And so this is following that recommendation from the legislature that said when we put this in the code to grant an exemption based on the rule, we want the rule to outline what that looks like and the steps that you have to go through. So that's what is listed here. There were a couple of additions that the committee made that perhaps could remove barriers from parent participation, to make sure that those barriers are removed and actually remove some requirements in code that say that a parent can't also work at the school. If they have run the election and they can't seat a council, then a parent who is a teacher at the school could qualify as a parent in order to be able to seat that council. So it outlines all of that, and that's primarily what is in this bill, in this rule.
Thank you. I remember when all those questions were arising. So I think, the clarification will be helpful, and it's helpful to know that the code asked the board to establish the process in the rule. And I think you also said that we're adding clarity on this one this year also, but you may over the next year look at any ways to simplify as well.
Absolutely. That's the plan.
Could you answer one more question for me? I'm not seeing hands from other board members, but what about these rules in code and rule, adjacent rule, I guess, or clarifying rule, it impacts content of the plan? Does the LEA have the ability to have the council choose the substantive parts of the plan, or are the substantive parts of the plan outlined?
Code primarily indicates, what the certain parts of it. Definitely, they have to identify their greatest academic need. They have to identify what is their goal. They have to identify what is the measurement. So at the end of the day, did we meet our goal or did we not meet our goal? It requires action steps. So how are you get from where you are to where you want to be? And then they need to attach the funding based on those steps. So in order to do this step, we're going to need this piece of funding. So to that extent, yes, the content of what happens in each one of those steps is the responsibility of the council. But yes, the code outlines each one of those steps.
Okay. So the code provides kind of the skeleton, and the LEA needs to flesh in,
yes,
the content of the flesh. It sounds like
that's correct.
That's a bad analogy. Maybe I'm coming off the heels of Halloween. I don't know. I'm not seeing any hands, so I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that the committee continue and approve R277-491, School Community Councils, Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee continue and approve R277-491, School Community Councils Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? That passes unanimously with Chair Hymas missing, or absent, not missing. Thank you so much. And that leads us to 3.6. Director Plant, again, School Land Trust website, cost benefit analysis.
Madam Chair, Scott.
Yes, sir.
You also recognize Director Felt for his input. So this was a combined effort on the part of Director Plant and Director Felt. So if you just recognize.
Yes, Director Felt, thank you. And is Director Felt in the meeting and will he be contributing to this item?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Member Chair.
I just thought maybe you need to recognize him, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was, I didn't have his name on my agenda, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That's a change. I just wanted to have him do it instead of me because, you know,
He had more.
Yeah, he wants to do it. So thank you.
Sure, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and look toward Director Felt and Director Plant.
Thank you. So I'm going to start. I thank you, Cami, for helping with the slides. Cami always helps me because I get nervous and I can't do the slides and speak at the same time. So the first part of this, since this has been posted online, I've had many questions about why was the website outside of the State Board of Education to start with. And so I'm going to quickly just try to give you a little bit of history on that so that you'll understand why we got into kind of a really difficult place when the website was brought in-house. When the School Land Trust program was created in 1999, it was a result of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument and a land exchange that happened there. The part of the purpose was to dedicate a cash payment where the federal government purchased some land from the state of Utah. It was $50 million that was dedicated to the permanent fund, but there were a lot of people who had their eyes on that money. And so this program was created to provide clarity and to provide a place that you could point to that the money coming from the trust lands was making a difference for schools. However, when the legislature created the program, the money was all dedicated to go directly to schools, and there was nothing put in there about any kind of administrative costs, although there was lots of administration that was required. And so the thought process was maybe to simplify this, we could do an online program. So that there was not a lot of paperwork and mailing and going back and forth and back and forth. It was the first school-based statewide program was this program. However, since we didn't have any money, there was an individual at the State Board of Education. His name is Randy Raffel. Some of you may remember him. He had been studying about coding, and he actually stepped forward and said, I think I could create a place for schools to submit their plan. And so he wasn't getting paid for this. He just did it. And so the first year he created, and I'm not sure if this is an application, Jared, or if this is a function. But anyway, he created a place where a principal could go in and select their school and they could enter a form. After the first year, and then he handed it off and he said, I did that for you, but I'm not good enough to now have to take a plan and make it into a report. And so we still didn't have any money. And So hired a student who was at the University of Utah in computer science who was getting ready to graduate, and he basically used this kind of as his senior project. By the time we had finished the second year, he had finished school and had started a business, and so he was basically awarded the contract. He had it for about 3 rounds of an RFP. However, in the third year, when schools were all trying to submit their plans on the same date, it crashed the server. And so the State Board of Education asked us to move the program someplace else. The server at that time was not capable of handling that much activity all at the same time. And so at that point in time, it was moved outside of the State Board of Education. That's how it ended up outside the State Board of Education. This young programmer who had the project then for a few years kept trying to do it on a shoestring. And because when he started his business, we basically were the flagship, you know, a young person starting a business, we were basically his flagship client. By then, we'd actually been able to secure some funding from the legislature in order to fund some administration of the program. By the time at the end of the third RFP, he told us, you know, I've done my volunteer service for the schools of Utah. This time when I apply, I'm going to apply based on how much it's actually going to cost. I'm not going to do this for you anymore. And so when the RFP went out, of course, his was about 3 times what we had been paying him. And he didn't apply. But another entity did, and under the rules, that was who was awarded the contract. And so then I think that takes us to this first slide. So we had a website that was not being funded at the level that it should have been funded. This entity, the third-party vendor that applied, misunderstood what they were applying for, and about 3 months into the contract told us that they weren't going to do it, that they had misunderstood, and they weren't going to terminate. And we had to have a website. We had principals who were ready to submit their plans and had to have someone who could do it. And so they stayed with us for a while. For about 5 years, I think 5 or 6, about 5 years. And then ultimately, and we were able to get some additional funding through the legislature, but clearly it was not enough. And they made the decision that they wanted to terminate the contract. They did agree to stay with us long enough, just in a maintenance mode until we could find a solution. And so you can see the options there that I went through to try and find another option. And ultimately it was determined that we needed to bring it in-house. And if you want to go to the next slide, then Cammy, yeah. So IT, Jared, I don't know, Jared, if you want to address this part, if you want me to keep going.
Yeah, I can jump in and then
Great, thanks.
Clarify if I miss anything. Jared Felt, USBE IT Director. So back in 2019, we created a rough order of magnitude. We call them ROMs. These are estimates for when new legislation comes down and we need to update systems. We provide a high-level overview of what we think without knowing all the details, because a lot of times this we need to act quickly and we don't have the time to really dive deep into what changes, because there's a fast turnover to get these rules in place for the legislature or the board. And so we do our best to give an estimate. So this was created in 2019. In that rough order of magnitude, we put some assumptions and some risks based on what we knew at the time. And one of those assumptions was USBE would have unfettered access to the existing site architecture database and the data. So that meant that we were assuming we wouldn't have to rewrite the school land trust application from scratch. We could just host it in-house and then continue to develop and maintain it. Unfortunately, that we weren't able to get the source code, the architecture, the data from the old system that Paula spoke about, because it was running on old technology that we didn't support at USBE. So this ROM was based on that assumption. So and Paula touched on this a little bit, that we had a short timeline because they were going to terminate their contract, and she talked about also some options that she looked at, but nobody else, the Department of Technology Services for the state didn't want to take it over, or SITLA didn't want to take it over. So we had to hurry up and get that in-house. And so, but with that said, we had to create this application from scratch. So I think that covers this slide, Paula. We do, when we do the ROM, we put a first year one-time cost to get, start the development process, and then ongoing yearly development support and hosting and maintenance that covers the ongoing support of that application. If you want to go to the next slide, or Paula, did you have anything to add to this? Okay.
But I think we're about 4 slides in now. I think we can go to the cost.
Okay, so this is pulled out of the ROM. So we estimate total man hours, what resources it'll take for that first acquisition activity, and then ongoing sustainment support for the application. And again, these numbers were based on us getting the application, the completed application from the prior vendor, which didn't happen. So that meant that these numbers were not accurate going forward, because we now had to increase our costs to develop this application from scratch. If you want to go to the next slide, Cami, please. And so in this initial challenges slide, I already kind of spoke to this, but it basically just says that we had to recreate the application from scratch. And please jump in if there are any questions. Cami, if you want to go to the next slide. And then this is just, and Paula, you can talk about this too, but it looks at, from Paula's numbers, they paid $455,000 to the prior vendor who underbid and realized that they underbid, and so that's why they terminated the contract, versus what USBE is paid up until this point. Next slide, please. And Paula, I'll let you take over from here if that's okay.
Thanks, Jared, very much. So this slide just indicates what the applications, not the application, the functionality. I've learned a lot through this process, and I'm learning to use the right terms. But these are the functionalities that were in the prior website that we currently have. So a lot of work has been done to make sure that schools can enter their plans, they can be approved online, the business administrators can get their the expenditures in. So this just indicates what is there. The next slide will indicate some functionality challenges and positive that have happened. We have some automatic and manual things that are different from the prior application and from the current application. This kind of will help indicate that to you. The bottom 3 are the 3 that we basically are still working on. The distribution has positive, the distribution into the database still has some challenges, but actually Jared thinks he might have worked that out based on a meeting we had 2 days ago, or at least a beginning to solving that problem. The final 2 have been a challenge, and I don't know if we'll really ever be able to solve it, because the initial creation didn't anticipate that the LEAs would be able to manage their financial part or be able to manage the users that their school users and that account access. We might be able to, but it seems difficult at this point in time. So the next slide, and actually there's there's actually sort of a correction on this slide, but probably some additional information that I think is important. What I have listed there at the beginning, and I missed this, is this actually, instead of saved hours on our part, it's actually hours, increased hours, because we have to do things for the LEAs. Those last two items that I indicated, we have to do things for the LEAs instead of the LEAs being able to do it for themselves. The integration from business administrators being able to enter their expenditures once instead of doing it in the state financial system, and again on ours, has saved business administrators time and a lot of frustration, not just time, but a lot of frustration, as well as integrating our program into Cactus so that when a school is created, we don't create it. Cactus creates it for us so that we are we're in line with that. The part about savings is really hard. I don't know how we would ever figure out the time saved for a principal to be able to enter online, for an LEA to be able to approve online, for us to be able to approve online. I don't know how we would ever be able to estimate that, but it's a lot. It's massive. So then maybe the next slide. I don't know, Jared, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think you covered that.
Okay, and then the next slide is just this. So we've talked about what we had before, that we currently have, some functionality changes that were different, some things that have been really positive and saved people time, and things that business administrators specifically really wanted. This indicates, this slide indicates what is still left to try and resolve that was in the prior application that we don't have here currently. But of course, all of this has to be determined based on priorities, and as principals and others indicate things that they would like or that are important to them or could be solutions for them. This is like part of that prior discussion. We have to be listening for simplification, right? Everywhere we are. There may be other applications that are more important than the ones that are listed here, and we just have to go through those one at a time based on priorities and need. The last slide is our challenges, and I don't know if Jared, you want to speak to these, but we had some challenges at the beginning. There was a lot of turnover in the developers, and every time you have a change in developer, then you have a new person who's trying to understand what they're working on. So that's just a list of the challenges. I don't know, Jared, if you want to address any of that, because you know that better than I do.
Yeah, just real quick. So tech debt is something that all applications have. You know, it's unplanned work, like you need to upgrade the code base, things like that, that don't always get prioritized in the feature creation. So there's some of that has to go on that delays other feature development. Staff turnover that Paula touched on. This project started at the beginning of COVID, and we were losing developers fast and furious because they were getting jobs, higher paying jobs, other places. So to that point, you know, you've got, when you bring on a new developer, you got to onboard them, and that takes some time. Quality assurance. So those are challenges based on turnover, as well as knowledge of business rules that Paula's team has versus what the the development team has. So they've got to work closely together, and they can't always test because they don't know, the business rules to test exactly. So Paula's team has to take time out of their schedule to test those, so that can delay things as well. And then new feature completion sometimes takes longer because of those challenges where, a developer has to understand exactly what the user needs. And a lot of the users are, outside of USBE. So Paula's team has to communicate with them and relay that back to us. And so, yeah, that touches everything I wanted to talk about on this slide.
I think that concludes our presentation unless you have questions.
I have two, but I'm looking for, I don't see any board member hands right now. I have one question was the $1.381 million for development and operation. With the original vendor, there was broken out an original development cost and then an ongoing and maintenance cost. And the second was smaller than the first. And then it looks like when we moved over to in-house, it just says both. US now. So was this the original cost to develop it?
So Tammy, if you could go to slide, I think
And is it annual?
it's slide 4. So when we have the first year acquisition cost. So this is when you're ramping up a project and you need to get the initial development done. That takes more time and resources. And then the sustainment, once you get it to a production level, the sustainment and ongoing cost is that second cost, $152,000 per year. That covers, a developer, project managers, hosting, things like that.
Oh, I thought those were related to the original vendor.
Yeah, no, this is for USBE.
This is for USBE. Then where does that 1.3
So
million come from?
that's the total cost of the 446 plus the ongoing costs. But again, these costs have increased because we weren't able to get the completed application from the vendor. So that bigger number, that 1.3 million, is from the time USBE took it over until the October.
And that was right around COVID time.
Correct. I think it was around.
Okay, so that's a total cost for the last 5 years. Oh, that's where I didn't get that in my head. I appreciate that. So the ongoing will be the 152.8. All things considered right now, we don't know about inflation and hiring and all that, but that's what we're predicting.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to keep in that, but again, it depends on the speed of how fast we want things completed. So that's our cost for a developer. We also use an in-house developer part-time that works on other applications. So we have one contract developer on this project right now, I believe.
Okay.
The ongoing is actually larger than that. We've been to the legislature because we realized that this was too low. It wasn't enough. I can get you those numbers. I don't have it right off the top of my head. But the appropriation that comes from the legislature now that funds the website is higher than those numbers. I can get those to you if you want them.
I think it would be helpful. Thank you so much. And then what Jared just mentioned segues to my other just comment and question. Have both of you been attending or attended some of our reports and requirements task force meetings?
I am not part of that. I know Katrina Brinkley, who's over the USBE project, is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, because I know in our Utah Grants program and our USIMS program, we've really trying hard to look at ways to get the highest amount of transparency and efficiency and compliance for the lowest amount of administrative burden and time. And it's this careful balance, but I appreciated Director Plant's language because I feel like we're really getting to a culture of where this is constantly in our minds now. And we've been trying to focus on this for 5 years. Like, man, people need to get in the classrooms, but they've got all these things they need to do, but we value transparency and compliance as well, and we need to for our taxpayers. So I just appreciate that you are bringing the list of functions to the users, to the LEAs, and allowing them to kind of help prioritize and choose what are your pain points, what do we want to tackle next, and that's the order where we're trying to make these improvements with the websites. So thank you for doing that. Much appreciated.
And if I could just add real quick, if that's okay,
Please.
Chair. So if you take the total cost and divide it by 500 or 5, which is how long USBE has taken over the project, you're about 260,000 per year. That includes the Paula does request. That's what's been spent, though. The 1.3-ish million is what's been spent. It's not what's been asked for as far as budget.
Right, and if I might follow up and just clarify, the State Board of Education has been helping us, and since this is a trust, the cost should be coming from the trust to benefit the beneficiaries. And so we've been trying to move to a place where the legislature appropriates what it costs to operate the program, and that there doesn't have to be subsidy from the State Board of Education, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect 100% sense. I'm cheering. Thank you so much. Appreciate everything you're doing. All right, that concludes that information item. And we're members and staff members, do we need to take 5 minutes before we finish our last hour?
I'm fine to continue.
Okay. Anyone else want 5 minutes?
I'll take the 5 minutes to get settled. Yeah.
Take 5 minutes? Okay, and I see a thumbs up from Member Boggess. All right, well, we got a couple, so let's go ahead and take 5 minutes and we'll meet back here at 11:06. Let's go ahead and get started again. And it looks like that we are on. Let's make sure we have our members. Do we have Vice Chair Kelly? Are you here? Member
I am
Boggess?
here. I am here, yes.
Please hold on. Train start and stop. Member Boggess, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, and Member Booth? Member Booth? Okay, hopefully we can't hear him, but hopefully he can hear us. All right, let's go ahead and get. Was that you, Member Booth?
No, it's me, ma'am. So, yeah, I don't know if it's back yet, but okay. Sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, hopefully he'll join us shortly. We'll go ahead and get started with item 3.7, which is action item special education add-on for new and expanding charter schools. And it looks like we have our leads, our minimum school program administrator, Dale Frost, and our school finance director, Sam Uri.
Sam, do you want me to start? Do you want to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Dale.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Dale Frost, Minimum School Program Administrator. Good morning. I think I can share. I'm going to share my screen just briefly because I wanted, before diving into the presentation, I kind of wanted to give you like an example of what issue are we looking at more broadly, and then because it will apply specifically to new and expanding charters, well, expanding charter schools today, but it's a broader issue than that with charter schools that have expanded in the past. So can you see that, Chair? Can you see my screen here? You have two spreadsheets up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So I want to use an example. I'm going to use Ascent Academies here. And so these are the October 1 head counts over here to the right. Ascent Academies had just under 3,000 students in grades K through 9, the vast majority of them in K6, and 429 special education students. So I wanted to give and compare two budget allocations of two very important funding sources to, a similarly sized LEA. So San Juan School District was the closest I could find. So Ascent Academies here, their grades K through 12 program. This is the program that provides. So it's slightly different for school districts and charter schools. It provides 0.9 WPUs for full-time students in grades K through 6, assuming they're full day K, 0.99, 7 through 8, and 1.2 for grades 1 through 12. For school districts, it's 1 WPU per full-time student. So they received $11.8 million in the legislative estimates. That's what their budget is based on. Let's compare that to San Juan here. You can see that San Juan received $12.6 million. So why is San Juan slightly higher? It's because of that weighting issue. But you can see these are not that far off. If you consider, it's 800,000 out of 11 to $12 million. Now let's talk about the special education add-on program. The intent of that program is to provide an additional WPU on top of the funding source above for special education students, 1 WPU per student. Now there's a lot more nuance in the special ed formula, and we can get into that, but largely that's the purpose, is to provide 1 WPU per student. But if you see here, going back to that, sorry, I'm not trying to open up Chrome. You can see that San Juan has slightly more special education students, and the weights aren't different or any of that. So you'd expect that San Juan would receive slightly more under the special education formula. And you can see that Ascent is receiving almost double the amount that San Juan is receiving for a smaller population. So that's the issue. So if I can, impress on committee members one thing, this issue was not ever an intentional issue, and it was something that built up over multiple years because of the procedures around the formula. And we'll show you how the special education formula was applied for new and expanding charter schools, and that gets to this rule R277479 and the issue at hand today. So I wanted to go to the presentation now and just show you, okay, how did Ascent Academy, I'm going to use Ascent, I'm not trying to pick on Ascent. There are a lot of charter schools in this situation. Ascent is not an expanding charter school this year, so they're not one of the directly impacted charters, but I wanted to bring this as an example. This is how I wanted to go year by year of the last 11 years to show you how this got so far out of whack. So in R27479, before it was updated in 2024, it had language about adding supplemental WPUs for expanding charter schools. So if you can, so unlike the K-12 formula, which is based on a prior plus growth calculation that uses October 1, the special education formula is based on prior year ADM. Well, if you have a new satellite campus or you're a brand new charter school, you don't have ADM data. You haven't gone through an entire year to report those enrollments and to have that ADM data. And so 479, the purpose of it was to provide additional WPU so that the services needed for those special education students could be provided right away. So let me show you, just kind of going back through history. So you'll see that, and I'm going to go more through the formula and you'll understand all these different lines. But the basic idea with the special ed formula is you take the prior year WPUs and you add growth WPUs up or down. And then if they're expanding, you have an expansion supplement, or if you're new. So, you know, back in 2015, Ascent had 109 WPUs essentially. They were projected to add 700 students. And so 72 WPUs were added to their allocation. Now that got wrapped into the prior year WPUs. And so, you know, then an additional WPU expansion was provided in 2017. And then by that time, they had enough data for the formula to award the growth WPUs. So after adding the 72 and the 93 WPUs, then you see this growth WPUs of the 229. All of those are summed together, and there wasn't applied a writing mechanism to get back closer to this one-to-one relationship. And that's how, and that's how we start to go down this path. With Ascent, the reason why it's gotten so different, the WPUs for students, is because they've gone through 3 expansions, large expansions over the last 10 years. So that's kind of the fundamental issue. And I'm going to go more through the formula, but I wanted to stop there and see if I can answer any clarifying questions, because I think that's the fundamental formula problem that needs to be addressed long term. And then in the short term, what to do for the charters that are expanding. Any questions at this time? If not, I'm going to go to the beginning.
Well, you're saying it's compounding.
Yes, that it's an issue that has compounded, and I only went back 11 years. My guess is that it has been an issue that's been compounding since the creation of charter schools. But I didn't go back in the history beyond that. So I just wanted to show you.
One more quick question.
Yes.
Now what was I just going to ask? I'll remember it and ask you when we stop again.
Okay. I wanted you to kind of see the overall, this is the basic school program. These are all the WPUs by program awarded. This is the largest part of the education budget. You'll see the K-12 programs are under the regular school basic program 1 and 2. These are by far the largest funding sources, but then the special ed add-on formula is the next largest after that, almost a $500 million. So it's a very important formula and impacts a lot of students across our state. So let me kind of go through a little bit in more detail how the formula works. And, you know, this seems like a very complex way to get to this one-to-one relationship that's the intention of the formula. But the purpose of this complexity is to provide essentially like a stable funding floor. If you have, you know, drops in enrollments over multiple years, you're not going to see a significant drop in your funding, which is ironic because we're standing here with the possibility, if we have to fully implement this rule, that's exactly what's going to happen for these charter schools. So let me walk through an example here and how this will work. So the way the special ed add-on formula works is that a district will, or an LEA will receive either what's called the foundation amount, which is a 5-year rolling average of SPED ADM. So the foundation amount is closer to this one-to-one, but even that is not a one-to-one relationship. Or this prior year SPED WPUs plus the SPED growth WPUs. And there's some nuance that the growth is capped for school districts, and we can go into that a little bit, but that doesn't significantly impact the overall amounts for school districts at this time. So let me show you how this works. So let's say that in fiscal 25, a school district received 9,400 WPUs. And again, each WPU is worth about $4,600. So you'd multiply the 9,400 times the 4,600 for which is about $40,000, $40 million, excuse me. So let's say that their 5-year average on SPED ADM was 9,500. And so therefore their foundation would be 9,500 WPUs. So let's say 5 years ago, they had 9,000 SPED ADM, and then 9,200 and then 9,600 and 90, and so forth, so that the average is 9,500. So then let's look at the other part of the formula, that prior year SPED WPUs plus growth. So let's say that in 24, they had 9,500 ADM. And if you remember from our conversation yesterday, ADM is like the full-time equivalent student. It's not the head count on October 1. It's the average enrollment throughout the entire year. So, so fiscal 25, let's say they had 10,000 ADM. So then that growth factor is calculated at they grew by 500 students. And you divide that by the prior year amount. So they grew by 5.26%. So if you multiply that times the number of the prior year ADM, you get 526 WPUs. And so you'd add that to the 9,400, which was the prior year SPED WPUs. So this district would receive either 9,500 WPUs or 9,926, whichever is higher, which is obviously 9,926, which is $46 million. That seems like a really complicated way to get to this intended one-to-one, but this complexity in the formula is why we had this ratcheting up issue. Any questions about the formula?
I do.
Yes, I can't see people, so please just, yeah.
Oh, thanks so much. And I remember my question from the previous two. It kind of segues into this, but is what we're talking about now what the 2024 update was? And in the 2024 update, were any of these concerns addressed, or do we need to address what you're talking about moving forward?
So can I ask a clarifying question, Chair?
Yes.
So there are two pieces to the formula. The formula is in statute in Title 53F. It's also in R2774779. For 99% of LEAs, the statute applies because all of the necessary data is there. 479 applies when you have an expanding charter school or a new charter school, when you don't have all of the data, all of these data points that we're talking about, the 9,500, the 10,000, and so forth.
So which one was updated in 2024?
So the 479 was updated in 2024. The formula itself was updated in the 2022 session with House Bill 113. And I'm going to kind of go through that history a little bit more in my presentation. Because implementing the updated, so in 2022, basically they moved everything forward a year, so that we can get things more current, which was good overall. But it created some complexity on the implementation front. We'll go there. And that's what caused us to look at the rule in more detail, needing to update it. And then, it gave us an opportunity to update procedures to have this writing mechanism.
So it went from a 5-year to a 4-year?
It was still rolling year 5-year, but beforehand it was like they moved that rolling 5-year average up a year, essentially. It used to be you had to go back, 5 years before the first time you have data. So essentially 7 years ago, all the way to 2 years prior. So now it is the current year back to 4 years prior. So it's still 5 years.
Okay.
It just got rolled forward.
Got it. Thank you.
So I want to just make this really clear. The SPED add-on formula is based on 2 years of ADM information. New and expanding charter schools do not have 2 years of ADM information until their third year of operations. They have to go through their first 2 years before we have that ADM information. So that's why in 53F2307, it specifically gives the state board rulemaking authority for addressing the number of WPUs, and where this has been addressed in rule, because it's relatively specific in statute for those that have all the information we need to. But in 479, again, it is for these new and expanding charter schools. And so, yeah, the new rule as it's currently in place was effective October 2024. So the history again that we were talking about. So House Bill 113 from the 2022 general session updated the formula, moving it forward. So in the 2023 fiscal year was the first time we had the new formula. That was the first year that we had to do projected ADM in the legislative estimates, and we had a mid-year update. Beforehand, we never had a mid-year update because you had all the data. It was old, but it was set. And so there was 23 was a learning curve year implementing this formula. And then we quickly learned through that process that, we also had to update this rule. And so we went through that process, and then the new updated rule became effective in 24. It existed beforehand, but the rule, as I'm going to show you now, has been in place since then. And so the first year that these updates were implemented was last fiscal year, fiscal 25. Okay, so here's the actual rule in 479.3. So it says a new or expanding charter school in its first operational year shall receive SPED add-on funding based on estimated enrollment projections made by the CDC. Again, remember, that's not the Centers for Disease Control, it's that Common Data Committee that we talked about yesterday, and approved by the superintendent for legislative projections. And then the superintendent shall initially calculate the add-on by multiplying estimated enrollments by 10%. So if you have an expanding charter school, the idea would be if we project you're going to have 1,000 students, that your legislative estimates would be 100 WPUs. But then so when we updated this rule, and I helped to in this process, what we were thinking about, we have to base a lot of our allocations on projections, and then we true up to actual data. One of the principles we try to follow is that you want funding to be tied to actual students. You always want it tied to real students at the end of the day. And so, when we were writing this rule, we were thinking, when do we have good data points to tie to? So that's why in this paragraph 3, it says the superintendent shall finally calculate the add-on by taking the actual number of special ed students reported on the December 1 count. So we do 2 census counts. We often talk about October 1, and we do SPED counts then, but the December 1 counts are the official counts for SPED. The logic being that quite often it takes a while with new students coming in to go through the IEP process, and you would tend to undercount students on October 1, but you'd catch them in December 1. If you have a new charter school, we have no ADM data. So we would it's kind of a wild guess at first, and then we true up how many actual SPED students do you have on December 1? Those are your WPUs. So it's straightforward for new charter schools. The problem is on the expanding charter school side is where we've run into this issue. So let me show you. So again, last year was the first year that this was implemented. There were 2 charter schools that it applied to. So that year 1 language that I just went through, the legislative estimates were created before that rule went into effect. And so the legislative estimates calculation did not include that 10% rule. It was the original formula. And then, but we did update to 242, that was their December 1 count. So Wallace Stegner did receive this cut last year of 85 WPUs because we trued up to their December 1 count. And then The second part, so for the second operational year, a new or expanded charter school shall receive estimated special ed add-on funding based on the December 1 count from the prior year. So when we were writing this, we were thinking, okay, when we do the legislative estimates, which happen right after the session, what's the best data point we have? We still don't have ADM data, so we're going to point to the prior December 1 counts because that's a real count. And then it says the final WPUs for the second operational year will equal the SPED ADM from the prior year. And so for John Hancock, they were in their second year of expansion last year. And so they had this inflated WPUs, and there was a significant reduction for them down to their prior year ADM. So that's what happened there. And I don't know why I should have moved. It should be down around John Hancock's charter school. So you kind of saw this.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So I just, not down to the penny, but roughly, would Wallace Stegner have lost about, I just had $300,000 and John Hancock about 1.2 million last year?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And, this was a new learning curve for us, and we were working on, we were working on these later in the year than we normally would have, because the rule had just gone into effect. And we were actually implementing these during the session. And when I saw this large drop, especially for, I apologize, I don't know why. Let me go back. So I wanted to stress this, because prior year WPUs are part of the SPED add-on formula, an incorrect prior year WPU level can perpetuate year after year. That's really important for this discussion. So let's look at these two LEAs.
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Yes.
By incorrect, do you mean misentered in the data, or
good question.
Some other reason that it would be incorrect?
Correct. So great question. So I know, going back to the public comment, for example, I would not agree with the term miscalculation, because if there wasn't a writing mechanism that was part of the procedure before, is it incorrect? No, it was correctly calculated, but the actual rule, the policy, and then the procedure behind the policy was not in line with the intention, which was this 1 WPU per SPED student.
I think, if I may, Chair Davis, it may be more accurate to say an inflated prior year WPU level can endure year to year, and that's really what's been occurring. These expanding charter schools have been inflated, and again, not due to an error in calculation, but just without a writing mechanism, and it's just been perpetuating year over year, through no fault of the charter school itself, through no fault of prior USBE staff to Dell and I getting here, but just a formula issue that has perpetuated as we've come forward.
And
thank you. And
okay,
sorry, Dale, go ahead and respond to that, and then Member Booth has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to be really clear on this, that it's not that if prior USBE staff had calculated this right, we wouldn't be in this situation. The rule and the procedure behind the rule was not correcting at some point. And if you project and add WPUs on there, and then you're adding growth after that, it's kind of the system is going to create, and you're incorrect. It was an inflated WPU count. Was it incorrect in the sense that it didn't follow rule of code? I don't see that. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, we have the system with its strengths and its weaknesses. We have what has unfolded through history over the last 11 years. But the bottom line is we have these children who need this specific kind of education and this specific level of support, which costs whatever it costs right now. So what would be your recommendation? How do we ensure that we're in compliance with the law in terms of providing for these special education students what we're required to provide for them? How do we do that given the system with its inflation or with whatever has happened over the years, and how do we correct the system or make small adjustments to the way the system works so that we can not continue to find ourselves in this inflated condition where we're putting the students and their specific educational needs and the resources needed to meet those needs at risk. We are so grateful that you guys know the intricacies and that you are being so forthright and direct and clear in helping us understand what has happened. But now that it's happened, what should we do?
Chair, may I try to answer that question?
Yes, please.
Chair, Board Member Booth, at a high level, my recommendation would be that yes, this system, the intention is to treat students in a similar situation at the same level, and that's not the case right now. But it's not the fault of the LEAs, and immediately, cutting at these allocations. When the rule was written, it was written with the idea in mind that, so let me use John Hancock as an example here, that they would be closer to this 1-to-1 ratio, right? And if they were at a 1-to-1 ratio in fiscal 25, they wouldn't have seen this large cut. They actually would have seen an increase between the legislative estimates and the final updates, which is what makes sense conceptually. You're expanding, you should get more WPUs. What I didn't know at that time, what wasn't clear, was that and I only show 11 years of history because that's as far back as I was able to go in last month with everything else going on. But I'm sure it went on before, because I'll show you the ratios, and they're in the backup. You'll see there were inflated ratios, 12 years ago too. And when I saw specifically John Hancock's large correction, that's when it, flipped a switch in my mind. Wait, this is nowhere clear a 1-to-1, their 24 WPUs were almost 4-to-1. And so, yes, if you right size that to 1-to-1, it's going to be a large cut for John Hancock, and it was painful for John Hancock. Luckily, they didn't have multiple years at that inflated level, but they still, I don't know all of the ins and outs, but with some conversations, it was a large impact. So my recommendation generally, you'll see in the backups, is the rule provides for these exceptional circumstances. The law has this prior WPUs plus growth. And so if you waive the rule for these certain charter schools coming up, that will not violate the law for 26. But I also think that for 27 beyond, we need to start addressing this. And that's not easy, because we don't want to hurt special education students either. So I know this is kind of a squishy answer, Board Member Booth. I don't know I know it needs to be addressed. I know it will take multiple years to address, but whether it's a freeze and not seeing increases and let the system catch up to them, or if you phase in over 4 years this reduction down so that LEAs have time to right size their special ed programs. I would love to have those, to model this out and work with these charter schools because I think everybody, once they see this, they'll realize, oh, this needs to be addressed, but we also don't want to hurt special education students. Does that help to answer the question?
Yeah, we're on the same page. So now to figure out what the steps are in order to make that happen is our challenge, I guess.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And so,
also Dale.
I was just going to say, this has caused me a lot of stress for the last 9 or 10 months once I discovered this, because of this fact. Go ahead, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, my question is, because we do not want to hurt students, but my question is, how will we hurt students that aren't there? We're funding students that don't exist. Would it be more that we'd be harming the system because we'd have to let go teachers and all of that that are in excess of what the actual student count requires? And that's why we need to phase it out so that this system has time to readjust.
So, Chair, if I can answer that question, yes, some of those students aren't here. So using the Ascent example here, back in 15 through 17, the special education budget was more in line with the intentions of the formula for Ascent. But over time, whether they were, I think it's perfectly reasonable for Ascent to not, because this was, it's kind of it's a terrible analogy, but the boiling frog analogy, it happened slowly over time. So maybe, there's infrastructure, I'm sure, within Ascent academies on how they've developed and built their special ed program that yes, if you're comparing to students who, there is an issue with looking at past data that you're comparing, that the data is not precisely lining up with the students who are there. But at the same time, if you cut 1.2 million from Syracuse Arts or 3 million from American Preparatory Academy, for example, you're going to seriously affect the students who are there. That's almost undeniable. Does that? But it would be, it's two things can be true at once, that there are, that because that, the neighboring school district is getting a lot less on a per student basis. But the charter school has operated under these rules, these budgets for years.
So because they are operating in excess of the need, they've gotten used to it. The students have gotten used to it. And to pull that away all at once would be too jarring for the students. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's hard for me to say, what the need is. And this we've had conversations on what does special education actually cost.
Actually, that's a good point, because we never get to meet the need. That's a great point.
It's to
what they
say
earned, I guess. What they qualified for is a better word to say.
Right. I mean, what they qualified for was what was in statute, and the rule was adding these additional pieces. And it wasn't until this last year that the rule, and procedures trued that up, and so, but the impacts are even greater this year. So let me quickly finish up and then we can talk about next steps. So John Hank and Wallace Stegner, they're not alone. If you look in the backups, I have all LEAs and those ratios again. So the ratios again, all I'm taking is, so like, for example, the 21 ratio for Ascent, that 2.41, that's looking at the fiscal 21 SPED WPUs and dividing that by the fiscal 20 SPED ADM. And, yes, there is this nuance that there was a formula change in that time period where it used to be 2 years prior. I wanted a single measure so that you could compare across years. But now under the current formula, the main driver of the funding is the prior year ADM. And you can see that there are a number of charter schools that are well above the 1.5 marks, are above 2, some are even close to 3. Districts, I just wanted to show you this, and this is, I don't think it's overfunded versus underfunded. I think it's that we have different levels of funding between the sectors. School districts, there's no new and expanding school district. I know that Alpine will be going through this soon, and honestly, I don't know how this was dealt with canyons, so we can, I'd have to go back further and do some more digging on how they dealt with canyons. But I want you to see that it's not a clear 1-to-1 for school districts either, but they almost never this 1.5 ratio. So there's certainly a disconnect between the sectors. Mm-hmm. That's the point I'm trying to show here. Okay, so we've talked about Ascent Academies. I just wanted you to see, a similar type of graph for Alpine School District. So, the ratio has been basically the same. So that whole growth, prior year plus growth, that has been working for, and this was kind of why I thought it was working across the sector, because it is working generally for the school districts. It just, for these charter schools in certain situations, that's where you have that ratcheting up phenomenon. Okay, let me jump into this year. So we have 3 new charter schools. Technically, Weber State University is reopening, but formulaically we're treating them as new. Because they don't have that ADM prior data, the 479 doesn't cause problems for them. We're going, the changes are going to be manageable and for new charters. It was last year too. It's really the expanding charter schools that we're talking about. Now, Wallace Stegner is expanding again, and they are actually seeing an increase year over year because they were right-sized last year. So we're going to really look at these other 3 that haven't gone through this. So Gateway Prep, when I talked to their BA, they saw the number of WPUs under the legislative estimates, and they were the one unique one where there was a real jump up year over year. And so they thought there was some issue, and they didn't budget all of those 255 WPUs. So talking to them about going to the 150 WPUs or so wouldn't cause catastrophic changes for them. But for Syracuse and Lakeview Academy, that's not the case. And I wanted to show you the similar kind of analysis for Syracuse Arts. So you can see here that Syracuse Arts, at least going back to 2015, has been at this inflated level for years. It's, and you can see that expansion WPUs going into the formula, and then the growth WPUs happening, and then that getting rolled into the formula. But the point I want to show here is that I think it's perfectly reasonable for LEAs to see for example, Syracuse Arts, to see their, now, I'm not showing you the legislative estimates amounts. I will show you that in a second. But to see that jump up, and that seemed, perfectly reasonable, that nothing is off mathematically. Then we have this other question for these.
Can I stop you for a minute, Dale? Because Vice Chair Kelly has a question.
Yes,
Maybe
please.
on that screen.
Yes, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do have a question. I'm curious. So what you're saying right now is the per pupil expenditure for SPED students at Syracuse Arts Academy is significantly inflated than your normal LEA or your traditional
compared to any school district across the state.
Right. Have we seen, and this may not be a question for you, Dale, but maybe it's something we need to look into, but have we seen significant academic success for those students over and above other SPED students at Syracuse Arts Academy, or and because there's always this question of, does additional funding equal greater success in student achievement? And so where they've seen inflated, as you were calling it, spending per pupil, has it resulted in success for these SPED students?
Chair, if I can, I can say I don't know that answer. And, another way to say it is this is a natural experiment. Let's look at that. And I think that would be a fascinating thing to look at, because you have a large sample size over multiple years. But yeah, I have not looked at that. I will say when we looked at this with legislative staff, we were looking more on the financial side to say, is there a clear delineation between those that are higher on this list and those who have greater carryover funds? And I was surprised to not see as much correlation as I thought I would see there. It's not as clear on the spending side, but yeah, on the student outcome side, I couldn't speak to that. Sorry.
And you're a finance guy, and that's what I kind of expected that answer. But I think it is something I think we as a board need to look into. Is hey, we've been funding these students maybe at a higher level per pupil. Has it resulted in greater student success? So.
Vice Chair Kelly, if I may, we're talking about revenue here. There are some complications on the expenditure side in that districts, for example, can supplement with local funds or other funds. Additionally, we have to throw the complicating factor of fiscal flexibility into this. And so there are some charter schools that have had larger carryover balances because of this overfunding issue, and have then transferred that through fiscal flexibility and allocated it for other purposes. So, I'm not saying I love the idea. I'm just saying there are some complicating factors that would take quite a bit of study. Just wanted to provide that context. So.
Okay, so very, very quickly, let me wrap up here, and then we can see where the committee, where chair you want to take things. So one question that wasn't clear for me is, so we had 3 charter schools that merged with other charter schools, and 2 of those had new campuses. So it's as if they had new satellites. And so looking at the definitions under the rules, it seems pretty clear that for APA, American Principals Academy, and the 2 new campuses for Salt Lake Academy are new satellite schools for the LEA. The reason why that 3rd one is not on there is because they don't have a separate school number for that other charter school, and that is Athenian E Academy, what was Moab Charter School. And I'd have to look into why that is, but under 18E, I couldn't see how they would qualify there because there's not a separate satellite school. And it did beg the question for me are these new satellite schools or not? They were existing charters that are now under a new charter school governing board. So just wanted to bring up these. That's why I have Salt Lake Academy and American Prep separately. The impacts are, and the application of the formula is saying the same. I just had this question on, is the intent that these are expanding charter schools or not? So that was the question I had here. What would be the
difference in the financial outcome?
No, so the application, well, if they're not expanding, then you wouldn't have to waive 479 for them. But just a plain reading of this, it seems like those 2, merging charter schools with their new campuses check each of these boxes, in my opinion. But so that's why I put that there. And then I did show you what we have projections for next year. Next year's even more uncertain because we're using that 10% times the projections, and that's much more of a shot in the dark. But we're going to have other charter schools in the same position next year. And then I also have questions about definitions. We can go into that later with large or small expansions. And so I have 5 questions here. You know, the first one was, do merged charter schools count as new satellite schools? Should the board consider waiving 479 for fiscal 26 for some of the expanding charter schools? And if you looked in the recommended action, I would recommend yes. And that would be for those who are seeing a reduction, you know, waiving that and then figuring out how we address this in a way that can minimize harm to special education students, but can get us closer to parity. And then I have questions about definitions and just the long-term. You know, I don't want to go more into that unless you want me to, because due to time. That concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer other questions, Chair.
I'm looking for hands. It's difficult. It sounds like we definitely need to request changes moving forward. Are those legislative requests in the formula in code, or do we just need to change the rule? And I'm not even talking about the potential hold harmless for this year, but looking forward, is that a legislative request or a rule only adjustment? Sounds like it's both.
So, Chair, it's kind of a tricky question. The technical answer right now is this is all in rule because these are the special case scenarios. However, because this has been rolled over for so many years and it affects the budget discussion, I'm sure the legislature will be part of the conversation, and likely a long-term fix should be a statutory discussion. But, you know, so it's right now, I mean, so if the legislature doesn't change the statute, technically this can be addressed in a rule. Will the legislature allow this to sit in a rule? And should the legislature, those are open questions that I don't know the answers for. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and my opinion is we should fix it in rule if the problem is in rule. And then if they see it's fixed and it's amenable, then that's fine. If they feel they want to codify it, that's fine too. But I think that we shouldn't wait. I think we need to start acting. My next question is the answer to the question of should mergers be considered expansions. I feel like personally, I need more information because we might feel like, well, that might fix this problem, but would it create other problems? Are there losses in other areas or other unintended, you know, domino impacts or consequences? So I feel like we need more information on that brought back. Is this time? I mean, obviously it's time sensitive because we've got these LEAs here and they're going, we've hired teachers and we've used these funds. But do we have a month to gather some more information on some of that? Or do we need to make a decision now on either a hold harmless, which is a waive, or we don't waive like last year with Wallace Stegner and John Hancock? Or do we do some kind of a hybrid that creates some consistency with what happened last year, but provides some relief to these folks who are saying, we don't want to go in and you can't go in and fire teachers right now. And also, if we do some kind of a waive, are we going to be audited and have an audit entity say you're funding students who aren't technically there? And what would that look like?
So, Chair, can I try to answer your first or second question and then maybe refer to Scott and or Sam on your last question?
Yes.
So as for the timing, the mid-year updates for all of the MSP mid-year updates are scheduled to happen in November, with the exception of these new and expanding charter schools that are based on December 1 counts, because we have to wait for the December 1 counts. So we, by rule, don't have to update the allocations for these charters in November. It doesn't say exactly when we have to update any, but according to the, we do have to update at some point. Our normal procedure would be to do that in December. So for sure, we have at least 1 month, because it would be the December allotments where those budget changes would occur for these expanding charter schools. But we could, we have a little flexibility on that too. As for the audit question, I don't think so, but I would defer to Sam and Scott.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So to the first question, so obviously we want to make sure that you, the board, finance committee, and that the public are informed about this. Unintended consequences, or call them what you will, except don't use the term miscalculation. My recommendation is that there's a motion, a draft motion for your consideration, the committee's consideration, is that you recommend to the board that we waive paragraph 3 of 479. And then when they, timing wise, as Dale spoke to, so there's the month of December, right? You're meeting the first week of, the board is meeting the first week of December, so that we can do it. Now, yes, we do risk an adverse audit finding. I mean, that's to it. But what I'd also like you to consider is, in light of the December counts, there is the possibility that it there could be more students that are identified. Is that right, Dale? So, I mean, we
That's
don't know.
correct.
Okay. Yeah. So I think
October was the stand-in.
You cut out on our end, Dale. So could you repeat that again, please?
Oh, correct. Yeah. In my estimates, I was using October 1 as a stand-in. If additional students are there for the December 1 counts, then the amounts would go up. But the changes are so significant that, for example, if Syracuse Arts loses 1.1 or 1.2 million this year, it's still, I don't know if catastrophic is the right term. It is seriously significant,
How did the two schools last year? John Hancock lost 1.2 million, and the other one lost over 300. That Stegner lost over 300,000. How did they deal with those losses? Did they fire teachers? Did they pull from other general ed funds, or what? How did they do that? What did they do to mitigate this loss?
I don't think we know that. We'd have to ask them and come back to you on that. I don't know if we have that level of detail on what they did or did not do. So.
Okay, and if we waive
I
the
can add
rule,
though, Chair Davis, as Dale's demonstrated, and I don't know if you can throw that back up, Dale, but they were not inflated at the same level as any of the schools in this situation this year. I believe, and as he mentioned, John Hancock was in the second year of their expansion. So while it was still, I'm sure, difficult for those schools, it was a somewhat different case for those schools last year.
Yeah. So John Hancock, you can see that their experience, they didn't have 10 years of experience at the inflated SPED levels, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's John Hancock, and then Wallace Stegner. You might ask, why is this not down to 1? And that's because this is comparing two different things. The rule says to go to December 1 counts, and we're comparing to prior year ADM. So Wallace Stegner did show significant growth in their student population. So So this 1.62, if you go to the ratios, is now closer to 1. But I do agree with Sam that the few things that we did here, the impacts were not going to be as, like, the infrastructure, it was either not as large of a cut or the infrastructure wasn't there to the same extent. But to Scott's point, I think we would need to get a lot more information to know the details on that.
I appreciate that. And I just want to clarify when I say, will there be findings in an audit if we move forward with this action? It's not because I'm afraid of a bad reputation in an audit. It's that often the audit findings indicate legality. And so I want to make sure that what we're doing is within the legal parameters and the financial funding that we're going to receive.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
please.
again. So I did consult with Ashley. I mean, it was just a VOCO, and VOCO is an acronym for voice confirmation, that we do have the legal, but you, the board, well, it'd have to be the whole board, to waive a paragraph in a rule, right? Saying, okay, look, you know, the whole reason why we're in this place is because, you know, we have this in the rule. So if you waive it, then the auditors would have to address the fact that you waived the rule, so then thereby the formula is waived, right? Or, you know, and then we can proceed from there. I mean, there's no guarantee that we wouldn't get, you know, some adverse finding, but from a legal standpoint, we try to do our due diligence. So, you know, I don't think I would make this recommendation to the finance committee had I not done that. So,
Okay.
Can I add to that? Sorry.
Yes.
One more thing I'd add to. So if you look at the statute, for example, for the K-12 program, there's not the same language that the board can you know, pass rules to change. We can't just decide, oh, okay, charters are now going to get 0.99 or 0.95. That's in statute. We have, because of these complexities, the special ed rule gives the board rulemaking authority to set WPUs. It's a pretty unique circumstance. If you look across all WPU-based programs, there's not a lot of cases like that. So I do think it is on the legal front. I'm not a lawyer, and so I would defer to the AAGs, but I did want to undergird what Scott was saying on that front.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not seeing hands, but I just want to say for myself personally, I feel better about waiving it with the information that the impact percentage-wise or structurally is much bigger this year for these LEAs than it was last year, because you worry about consistency with what we're doing here at a state level. And then the other, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. When we say we're waiving the rule, that means it's waived for this year. It's not like a 1 month for next month's allocation, and then we're going to refigure this out. It means this is waived for this year. These folks that came to speak with us today are moving forward with the money that was allocated under this current code and rule, and then we're going to figure out how to fix it moving forward for future years. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So this is Scott again. So again, we're recommending that the finance committee recommend to the board that we're not asking to waive the whole rule. We're just asking to waive paragraph 3 of the rule, so that.
And Scott, it's only paragraph 3 for the expanding charter schools that would see.
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
So new charter schools it would still apply to. Wallace Stegner would still get their increase for their new students because they're on the other side of that equation. We're really talking about those 3 charters, Salt Lake Academy High School, American Preparatory Academy, well, actually 4, Lakeview Academy and Syracuse Arts. Those are the 4. We heard from 3 of them today.
Right.
I'm comfortable moving forward with the motion as stated, but member or Vice Chair Kelly has his hand up. So let's hear from Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at the recommended action on our agenda, and I'm just trying to look at you're recommending then that just paragraph 3
be waived, not the entire rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Section 3, paragraph is the true up of the WPUs.
You get cut out there, Dale. So
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Kelly. Yes. Section 3, paragraph 1 of the rule is the section that would require the true up to the December 1 counts and or prior year ADM for these expanded.
okay, so how it's written there on the screen right now, R277-479-3. So that means it's paragraph 3.
It's section 3, paragraph 1.
Yep. Got it. All right.
Are you going to make that motion?
I'll make that motion if you're ready for me to. Yeah, sure.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I motion that the committee recommends that the board waive R277-479-3, parenth 1, charter school special education add-on funding for FY26 for expanding charter schools whose SPED add-on and SPED self-contained allocations would be reduced from their amounts in the legislative estimates for these programs under the rule.
Thank you. There's a motion on the table that or on the floor that the committee recommends that the board waive R277-479-31 on charter school special education add-on funding for FY26 for expanding charter schools whose SPED add-on and SPED self-contained allocations would be reduced from their amounts in the legislative estimates for these programs under the rule. Seeing no hands, those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously with Chair Hymas absent. And I know
I'm here if you can hear me. Sorry.
Oh, hi. Welcome.
I thought I heard another voice in there.
Are you a yes or a no?
I am a yes. I said aye. I should have said yes, but I am here. Thank you. I apologize for interrupting and being late.
Oh, it's fine. I'm glad you made it, and that's just fine. I'm sorry I didn't see you previously. I just wanted to. I know we're 10 minutes over in our ending time here, 12 now, but I want to thank our staff for working through this. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This meeting is scheduled. It was notified to go till 12:30.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad.
Sorry.
Then we have time for our last two information items. That's
they're just they're just summaries. We'll be done before 12:30, but they're just so you know, they're just the summaries of the info. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
then before we do that, I just want to take a point of privilege and thank our staff. You know, I appreciate when I hear someone, you know, like Dale say, listen, I've been kind of sick about this. Not sick wasn't the word you used, but really just thinking so much about this since seeing the complications from the way these things are compounding. And then I want to just express appreciation for those that came and gave public comment today, because certainly you're going through the same thing in your schools, you know, looking at these numbers, and then what happens if we have losses similar to what happened last year, and then how's that going to impact our staff and our students and all these things. And I appreciate you coming and taking time to just wait through this long conversation that we just had and providing input. So thanks to all who contributed there. And we'll go ahead and move forward with our last information items, 3.8, Deputy Superintendent Jones for recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements.
So, ma'am, you took care of the recognition of, you know, achievements, progress, and improvements by recognizing Sam and Dale and their efforts along this line. So at your direction, we can proceed right to the next information item. With that. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Then
can I have a quick point of privilege too?
Yes, please.
If we'll note that John Palmer from Financial Operations is also the Employee of the Month this month. So
yes, he was. Congratulations, John. Thank you for bringing that up. We appreciate all of our staff and the countless hours of work that you put in here. Let's move to 3.8.1 Program Monthly Report on USIMS. And we've got IT Director Jared Felt and USIMS Project Manager Katrina Brinkley.
Madam Chair, I'll just turn it right over to Katrina and she can start into it. That's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And my apologies. I am currently in St. George at the state marching band competition. So if my camera gets a little dodgy or my sound breaks up, please let me know as I'm on hotel Wi-Fi today. So I'll go super quick so Rebecca can give her update as well. Thank you, Cami, for sharing the screen for me. So for the educator domain in the last month, we were scheduled to release the educator assignments to the LEAs. There were some concerns by our educator licensing team that may not be ready for the larger LEA groups yet. So we pulled that back. We're waiting. We're finalizing and finishing and making sure that things are really great before we let that go. We also identified the need for the assignments data to come from USIMS back to Cactus, which was not originally planned to happen until after the release. So we're working on that right now to get that in progress or to get that in place so that USIMS is sending assignment data back to Cactus. The key component of that is that USIMS allows for an educator to be assigned to multiple LEAs or multiple schools in an LEA, which Cactus does not currently support. So we're having to go through some nuances of how to send that assignment data back to Cactus and make sure that it's represented correctly. And that's currently ongoing. We're working with our LEAs, those in the focus working group, to get in and use those assignments aspects of USIMS to see how it's working and to get feedback from them. We're hoping to release here in the next couple of weeks. Any questions on the educator domain before I jump into finance? Maybe I'll just go through all three. Chair, are you okay if I just cruise?
I don't see any hands.
All right. So for finance domain, we are currently working on verification of data. We have received data from 2 of our LEAs, 2 different vendors, and we're verifying that that data is coming correctly. We have identified some nuances where it's not quite matching up with UPEFs. So we're going through and verifying that information and seeing where things are a little bit different, making sure that we are committed to having the exact correct information that UPEFs is displaying as well in USIMS. And then finally, for the student domain, we are working on the student backpack, obviously. We do have a huge win in the IEPs this last month. We were able to deploy the IEP plan identifier to USIMS. So you are able to, if you're using USIMS and the EdFi API, you're able to receive a notification that, hey, your student may have an IEP. Please log into your SIS and see what information could be there for them and contact the previous LEA. And that has been released. And on that note, we have some great news. We have one SIS that has been using the assessments portion of USIMS for a while now. However, our first SIS is going live in the next month with being able to retrieve data from the USIMS student backpack. And they will be going live with 2 of their LEAs. Iron County and Cache County have been working phenomenally well and going through things with us and being really patient as we sort all of that stuff out. And they are ready. They're parallel testing right now and looking at things, and we're looking to go live to production in the next month. So those are the huge wins for USIMS this month.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that summary. And exciting news about the LEA. We're onward and upward. Let's go ahead and move then to our next information item, 3.8.2, on Program Monthly Report PMR on Utah grants. And we have Grants Manager Rebecca Nielsen and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson.
Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to come to Finance Committee and present on the latest activity on the Utah Grants Development. Rebecca Nielsen, Director of Grants Administration. Again, appreciate this opportunity. So over the past 2 months, I have had the opportunity to spend 2 solid weeks in Virginia working with our vendor, REI Systems, on continued development for the Utah grant system. That's been a hyper-focused period of time where we have accomplished a lot. So a lot has happened over the past couple of months. The This summary is just kind of a brief skimming of that, but a lot of foundational work has been put in place for development that will take place later this year, as well as into next year. So just a brief recap of what has happened since our last meeting. We've continued on refinement of supporting multiple funding sources on our competitive awards. That should say for competitive awards, not or competitive awards. So when we have competitive grants that are coming from multiple different funding sources, we now have the ability for the LEA to complete only one application rather than one application per funding source. So that's a significant reduction in effort by our LEAs. That's been our primary focus as we've been working on Utah Grants Development, is to reduce the burden of our LEAs, and this one falls directly in line with that goal. Our current development work is to continue working on a PDF comparison tool where we can compare application versions side by side, continuing to enhance reporting and dashboarding, refinement on pre-application functionality, carry forward, and global search. So all three of these items, we have put into place some functionality, but we needed to do just a little bit of tweaking on that functionality to make it work for all of our scenarios. We found that once we put that into place, there were a couple of things that didn't work as we had intended, so we're working on fixing those items and refining that work now. The work that we're currently taking place now and expect to have in production by the end of the year is an expansion on our help resources, expanding our pending task functionality so that we can see what is pending much more easily, improving on our reporting usability. You'll see a significant change in dashboarding, so where you find information within Utah Grants, including reduction in the number of clicks needed, for example, to create a payment request. We are also spending quite a bit of effort on our FFATA reporting. So this is the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act. Essentially, we have a report that we have to conduct, submit every time we make a sub-award to an LEA. We have to make sure that the government knows that we're making those sub-awards. And that's taking our staff a significant amount of time to do that. We are building an API so that that can just directly feed from Utah Grants, and that will save our staff over 40 hours per month in being able to automate that FFATA process. So that's a great long-term cost savings that we will experience. Looking ahead to next year, we are continuing to work on design for competitive announcements and changing our workflow to reduce the number of clicks needed to complete those applications. We're working on the USBE view updates to make things a little bit more streamlined, especially when we have multiple funding sources. We are looking at making improvements and reducing the number of steps in approval workflows, specifically awards, payments, budget revisions, and site visits. And then also changing the way that our risk assessment workflow is currently running through USBE, how program staff see those risk assessment tasks. We are also looking at the possibilities of changing the IDT design. The IDT is essentially like a transfer or a journal entry. That's actually taking Dale and his team a significant amount of time to enter any journal entries that are needed in Utah Grants. So we're looking at redesigning that process to help add additional efficiencies. And that's it. Any questions? Lots going on.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's a great summary. Is it possible to bring that motion back up to the screen that we just made for waiving the rule of 479? So my question is this: we just waived the rule. Do we need to, as a committee, make a recommendation that staff is going to bring back recommendations for how to phase in a corrective function so that we don't hurt these LEAs with MOE and some of these other things? Do we need to make a motion, or is that just assume that's coming back next month?
So, man, I talked to Ashley. I think it's just implied that we'll do that. I mean,
based on this conversation that we had today.
But if you want to, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. There's no harm in doing it. But we're moving forward to, to resolve this.
Okay, I move that this committee request that staff bring back recommendations for corrective functions to R277-479 next month. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. We're 6 minutes early. Appreciate all of you.